It's work. All right, with the technical issues resolved, we'll go ahead and open the meeting. This is the September 5th, 2023 meeting of the City of Charleston Board of Zoning Appeals Zoning. Present here today, we have Allison Grass, Robin Richards, John Bennett, Bill Goodwin Jr., Chaffee McKay, and me, your chair, Jeff Tibbles. Present from the planning staff are Lee Batchelder, Penny Ashby, Emma McQuarrie, and Omar Muhammad, who helped us with this live stream. These proceedings are being recorded, and we ask that those who speak please identify yourself for the record. We will conduct this meeting in the usual fashion. We will first receive information from city staff about the application and their recommendation. If the recommendation is favorable and no one objects to the application, the matter is uncontested. The Board of Zoning Appeals usually, but not always, approves uncontested applications. For all applications, the board reserves the right to ask questions of the staff, applicant, or others in attendance prior to rendering a decision. If, however, the city recommends against the application, or if there is opposition to the application, we treat the application as contested and hear from the applicant and anyone else who is in favor of the application. Next, we hear from anyone opposed, followed by a short rebuttal from the applicant. We then close the public hearing portion of the meeting for that particular application and open discussion to the Board of Zoning Appeals members only. We will then make a decision to approve with conditions, or deny the application. The Board of Zoning Appeals Zoning has the authority to do three things. Number one, hear appeals to decisions of the zoning administrator. Number two, grant special exceptions, a fact-finding function of the board. And number three, grant variances to the zoning ordinance if the application meets the hardship test outlined in section 54-924 of the ordinance. The board may deliberate and make a final decision on a matter by a majority vote of members present at the hearing and qualified to vote, provided that not less than a quorum is present and qualified to vote. However, an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the board members present and voting shall be required before a use variance may be granted. For a variance to be granted, the Board of Zoning Appeals must make the following findings. A, that there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property. B, these conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. C, because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. And D, the authorization of a variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property or to the public good, and the character of the district will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. Pursuant to our ordinance, I have to swear you in if you intend to speak tonight. So if you do intend to speak, please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? You'll signify by saying, I do.
I do.
Thank you. All right, the first item on our agenda this evening, A, review of minutes and deferred applications from previously advertised BZA-Z agendas. Number one, review of the minutes of the August 15, 2023 board meeting. We've got that, those minutes in your package. I have a motion. All right, Mr. Bennett moves to approve. Mr. McKay seconds. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes. The minutes of the August 15, 2023 board meeting are approved. Next on our agenda, section B, new applications. Number one, 154 Cannon Street, Cannonboro, Elliottboro, TMS number 460-11-04-131, zoned GB, requesting reconsideration of the BZA-Z board's decision to approve a retail use and private club with a condition requiring a contract with the 158-160 Cannon Street parking horizontal property regime to use the additional parking spaces after business hours. The owner is Kurt Beacon. The applicant is Joel Adrian, Coastal Creek Design. Mr. Batchelder.
This is an appeal of the decision that the board made 2 meetings ago, I think. And the applicant can explain that they were unable to obtain a lease for the parking on that adjacent parking lot. So they would like to appeal the decision and bring, I think, new attention to the board, new information to the board that wasn't available when we first made that decision. And I'll answer any questions.
Okay. Does the city have a position on the request for reconsideration?
Well, we weren't recommending that condition be attached to the approval.
Okay, at the time.
So we would not seek to, well, we would be fine with removing that condition.
Okay. So the city recommended approval without the condition at the time?
Correct.
All right. And the city's position is still that it can be recommended for approval without condition?
Right.
Okay. All right, well, first of all, let me ask, is anybody here in opposition to the request for reconsideration, which is item B1 on the agenda for 154 Cannon Street? If you're here in opposition, just raise your hand. I don't see anyone in opposition to that application. Mr. Adrian, you're here to present.
Thank you. Sorry, Joel Adrian, Coastal Creek Design here for applicant owner at 154 Cannon Street. Lee, I don't know if you can maybe cycle through a couple of the photos, but I think the error was probably on my part in not explaining thoroughly that we had hoped to receive approval. You read it right there, that because we hoped to receive approval to use the additional spaces in the parking lot immediately adjacent to 154 Cannon. Prior to the meeting, we had reached out to the horizontal property regime, did not receive definitive response after you all made it an item. And part of the approval, we reached out again, in which we did receive our response, which was no, that they were not interested in subleasing those additional spaces. The graph on the screen shows a little highlight of where 154 Cannon is. Little dashed lines go to that gravel parking lot. That gravel parking lot is 312 feet away from the piazza door. And what I did not pick up on prior was that there's actually pay to park available in that parking lot. There are monthly leases. They are currently full. There's a wait list to get a monthly lease in that lot. I spoke with the manager of the property. He said that there is 24/7 pay to park. And so even though we did not receive approval from the horizontal property regime to use the property right next to us, we do within the 400 feet that's required to have an option for people to pull in, text the number, pay for however many hours they want to stay in the park, walk 312 feet, use the facility, and then leave and not disturb any of the residential spaces around. I don't know if you could go through, there's always, so what I did was I just went out there multiple times, and so some of these photos are taken on the weekend, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock. That's what the parking lot looks like. My back is next to Nome at the intersection of Cannon and President, shooting across there. So on the weekend, there's availability. If you want to just continue cycling through some of the photos. Also took photos of the parking lot that's associated with our building. And after 6 o'clock, it's vacant as well. These are shots of the street parking, which is residential. It's available. There's the parking lot. Interesting enough, other than that car, which was moved for the flood, the only other cars that are sitting in that parking lot after 6 o'clock are the ones that are in my client's space that are not his cars. So the request is that the condition of the letter from the horizontal property regime be removed and replaced with we have availability at the paved park at the intersection of President.
Okay. Can we turn it back to that slide that showed the property, please? And I do remember this application. I remember you had some on-site parking. And what do you have there? 5 spaces on site, is that correct?
5 spaces on site, there are 12 required for the use.
Right.
And we had set the use up initially to where the retail use, you only need 3 spaces for, went from 10 a.m. until 6 in the evening, but then there was an overlap because the club could be used at those hours as well. And that the hope was that at least after business hours, we could use the other spaces in the parking lot.
Okay.
That's what they were told. No, definitively, unfortunately, happened.
Well, and I do recall that there were some comments during the public hearing about concerns about parking. I don't recall a discussion about this lot, so I'm glad you brought it up. And your due diligence, Mr. Adrian, on this parking lot, going and looking at it, is it primarily a day use lot as opposed to an evening use lot?
Absolutely. The cars you see in that picture, obviously I didn't take that picture, but when I drive by in the mornings, I live on Wentworth, and I'll take this road, the lot's probably 70% full. But at 6 o'clock in the evening, there's maybe 10 cars in that parking lot.
All right, well, we have no opposition here this evening. Does any board member have a question for Mr. Adrian? Yes.
I just wanted to clarify. So you're not allowed to use the parking that won't be used on site after hours?
We can use ours,
Right.
our 5 spaces, but the other 18 spaces that are in that lot, we were told that they didn't have any interest in subleasing to us after
Okay.
hours.
I just wasn't sure. Thank you.
And I think the idea and the design behind the board's decision was to ensure that you had sufficient parking for the club use, which began in the evening. And
Correct.
so that was 6 p.m. We wanted you to secure additional parking spaces so that you didn't overwhelm the neighbors or the neighborhood with cars coming to park there in the evening hours. But if you have an opportunity to park cars at a pay lot or have direct people to the pay lot there after hours, that would seem to alleviate some of the issues.
The parking garage across the street, do they have parking spaces available?
That is NUSC, we don't have access to those. I will add, not that it helps, but if you look at that graphic, you go to B Street, between President and Ashley, there are 15 metered spots along there. Those obviously are further than 400 feet from our door, so I didn't put that in the application, but they do exist.
What is the capacity for this use?
I believe, to go back through, is if we have the floor plan sheets, it should say what our total occupancy is that's allowed. It was,
I believe based upon the decision that we made, I think they had a 12 parking spot requirement.
we had 12 that were required, and I believe that accommodated a use occupancy of 30 to 32 people at one time in the facility.
So with the 5, we were thinking that they would need the extra 7. And if they have extra 7 available in that pay to park lot, I mean, they can't secure, obviously, a monthly lease there, but there is an option for people.
There is, the only other option would be the old Wendy's restaurant, which is by where Brewers used to be. That's another pay to park, but it is significantly further away than this gravel.
Right, and that's within 400 feet.
Correct.
Would otherwise qualify if you had a permanent agreement or it's within the 400 foot measurement.
Used as a bar?
No, it's retail, first floor, and then the second floor proposed use was private club.
And occupancy of the club?
That's where I said the total 30 to 32 people. I believe the retail, 1 per 400 square feet, maybe it was like 2 people in retail, and then the rest were up in the club area because it's the requirement is 1 parking space per 3 people per every 15 square feet of space up there. But I'm sorry, I guess I didn't have the floor plan sheet on there that showed exactly what that was when it's calculated out. It's on the original application.
Will the available spaces be reserved for staff or employees, or will they be made available to patrons?
So I would assume that most likely the staff would park probably in one of the spaces, the other 4 would be. But if it needed to be that staff is paying to park, staff would pay to park.
So procedurally, we're just approving.
Procedurally, the request is for reconsideration, and specifically the request is for reconsideration of the condition that was placed on the granting of the special exceptions. Yeah. So if somebody were to make a motion, they would move to grant reconsideration by removing the condition, and then that would go up for a vote.
We granted the use of the private club.
We granted it under the conditions, so once we, it's still got to be a supermajority vote, I think, to remove the condition and to grant the motion to reconsider because it is a use variance.
So I don't know, is it really a use variance or that use is approved for that location?
It's a special exception, right?
It's a special exception
Not a
for
use
parking.
variance?
It's just a special exception for parking.
Okay.
Special exception.
In that case, there's no use variance, it's a simple majority vote.
So the use is approved, make sure I'm clear.
Yeah, with the condition that they can do,
Parking.
they can have the use. The use is not the issue, it's the lack of parking that is the issue. There's a request for a special exception to not provide all the required parking due to the constraints that the site has.
Did we receive a letter from the neighborhood, even though it was outside of the neighborhood a little bit? Didn't we receive a letter from them?
We did on the original application, the property association, correct, even though it was outside,
Mhm.
the Marion,
Okay.
yes, had written a letter, neither in support nor against, said that he would defer to city.
Any further questions? Want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to request reconsideration of the BZA board's decision to approve retail use private club with the condition requiring I guess removing the requirement of the contract for 188 Street horizontal.
Okay, so Mr. McKay has moved to grant the reconsideration and remove the condition. Is there a second? All right, Ms. Grass seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? One is opposed. Mr. Goodwin is opposed. The ayes have it by a count of 5-1.
Thank you.
The reconsideration is granted. The condition is removed. Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda, I have to recuse myself. I'll be back in a moment.
The next item on the agenda, B2, 2318 Sunnyside Avenue, Wagner Terrace, TMS number 46413000046, zone SR1. Request special exception under section 54-110 to allow vertical extension and horizontal extension of the non-conforming one-story building footprint. 1.5-story addition with bedrooms, bathrooms, workout music room, and rear balcony, having a 3.3-foot west side setback and a 17-foot total side setback, 9 feet and 18 feet required, over Drew Permiller and Devin Wade, applicant Kyla Sims, Synchronicity.
So this is a residential property in Wagner Terrace. See it here on the zoning map.
The lot has a one-story house on it, and the applicant is requesting your approval to allow that footprint to be expanded with a 1.5-story addition on top, and to allow a slight increase in the footprint. And here is the aerial view of the existing house. And I'll just note that on the zoning map, you see a garage, square structure in the back of the house. And that was a garage, and it was demolished at some point. And between early 2019 and early 2021, I think, according to the aerial imagery that we have. So here's an aerial image from earlier this year, actually. And you'll see there is no garage in the back corner of the property. And that's a question that a neighbor has raised, so I'm just bringing that up now. The survey, which is dated in 2019, shows the garage being there. And the applicant's materials use that garage footprint to establish the existing lot coverage versus the proposed lot coverage or lot occupancy, according to the terminology of the zoning ordinance. And so just to touch on one part of this request, so they're requesting the change in the footprint that you see from the left existing footprint to the right footprint, where this rear corner is filled in. They are requesting that without any variance. So, but the existing house, the proposed footprint is over the minimum or the maximum allowed lot occupancy of 35%. But they are saying that their existing lot occupancy with that garage that was removed at some point, maybe within the last 3 years, I think that's the applicant's position. So in effect, it would still be a valid building to use to establish what the existing lot occupancy is. And that lot occupancy was larger than what they're proposing. So they're saying that they had enough lot occupancy, now they're reducing it, but they're still over the maximum allowed lot occupancy of 35%. They're at 41% as proposed footprint. And so that's a question. But the bigger issue, in my opinion, was the special exception to allow this vertical extension and this slight horizontal extension in the back corner here of a non-conforming building footprint with this 1.5-story addition that they're proposing. And the existing house has a 3.3-foot west side setback and a 17-foot total side setback. And so vertically, they're adding to the existing house that's there going up. And then with this slight addition in the back, they're also required to obtain the approval for horizontal extension of the non-conforming setback. In that case, it's a total non-conforming total side setback. So here are the plans. Existing on the left, proposed on the right. So right now there's an attic space, really a half story on the existing house, but it's just a one-story house. So on this sheet, you see the proposed second floor on the left and the half-story on the right on top. So that's the top floor, right? And we planned here, so existing on top, proposed on the bottom. So it becomes a 2.5-story house. The rear elevation shown here. And this would be the west side elevation. And then the east side elevation. So the dormers create that 1.5-story or that half-story on top, because that would be a room on top of the proposed second floor. So that is the request, and I don't know exactly when that garage in the back was demolished. I know it was gone by February 8th, 2021, because that's the first aerial image we have after the 2019 images from early 2019, when it was there. So the question would be, was it there within the last 3 years? And I don't know that definitively. But there is opposition. This is, and I went ahead and added this email into the PowerPoint because I realized that the attachments to the neighbor's email were not in the packet of information that went to the board members. But you did see the email from the neighbor. This is, I'm not sure what her name is, 20 old, and she's the owner of 2320 Sunnyside, which is the house immediately to the west of 2318. And she's raising a number of questions, one of which has to do with the garage and the fact that it's not there and hasn't been there for some time. And this is information that she submitted with that, and not sure exactly. This has something to do with the fence, which I don't think is relevant to the issue before you tonight. And then this is a survey. Now, this survey is dated July 2019. According to the survey, that garage is gone. So that's interesting information. And perhaps that creates an issue for this application. And then she's raising this question about the covenants and restrictions on the property that prevent the fence taller than 6 feet. Again, I don't think that's an issue for this board because that's dealing with a fence. It's a private covenant, not something the city has any role in enforcing. So, and then here's the view from her property looking at the backyard of 2318. And I'm just mentioning this because it's the only opposition that I'm aware of for this application. And so here's the neighbor's house right here, 2320, and here's 2318, and this is the image, aerial image that we have from February 8th, 2021, that shows that garage gone. So.
Didn't the Preservation Society submit a
Oh,
letter of
yes, that's
opposition?
true. Thank you. So the Preservation Society did send a letter of opposition to this, and that is part of the public comment packet that you received prior to the meeting. But go ahead and speak to the issues. I think, well, let me just view this slide right here. So there are 2-story houses and 1-story houses and 1.5-story and 2.5-story homes on Sunnyside. Sunnyside Avenue is, I guess, the northern street in Wagner Terrace. It is outside the city's BAR district. So the old city district and the BAR demolition purview district, where the BAR has authority to review demolitions of any exterior features on a house that is 75 or 50 years or older. And this house certainly is. That jurisdiction for the BAR ends at Mount Pleasant Street. Mount Pleasant Street is about a block south of Sunnyside Avenue. So there is no BAR jurisdiction up here, BAR review of any changes to the exteriors of these homes. And perhaps that is something that needs to be changed. I don't know. That's not my decision to make, but I just know that the city hasn't said this is an area that deserves BAR's protection. And it certainly does have an effect on the other parts of the peninsula where they do have jurisdiction, because some of the proposals that we've seen for homes in Wagner Terrace and other neighborhoods and have not been approved by the BAR because of the changes to existing features on homes that those changes would require. So I don't think that I understand the Preservation Society's concern and their position, but I don't see how you can say to a property owner up here that they can't have a 2 or 2.5-story home when the zoning allows that, and there are no zoning restrictions against the alterations of existing homes. There are, of course, setback requirements and lot occupancy requirements and that sort of thing, but no restrictions on altering existing homes. So I don't think, I wouldn't base my recommendation to the board on that concern for that reason. So it boils down to, is the extension, vertical extension and slight horizontal extension of the non-conforming building footprint going to adversely affect the neighboring property, and light and air is the issue. And the other thing I'll mention is that these homes are typically sited so they're closer to one side property line than the other, and they don't meet the setback requirements of the SR1 district, which is 9 feet on each side and a total of 18 feet of side yard setback. And so the non-conforming building footprint is not uncommon, and 2-story homes are not uncommon. So I feel like this change would not be an unreasonable intensification of the non-conforming use, and that was what I've indicated to the applicant all along. So my recommendation would be for approval of this application. Now, there is still a question of the garage and when that was demolished, and I don't know the answer to that. So that is a question.
Thank you, Mr. Batchelor. So the city's recommendation is for approval. Is there anyone present to speak in opposition? Just raise your hand. Okay, thank you. We'll hear from the applicant first, if they're present.
Good evening. My name is Todd Richardson. I'm a principal with Synchronicity and representing the applicant. Thank you for hearing me tonight. This project is like many that we see downtown where we have zoning which is overlaid as a blanket, as I say. Usually it fits, sometimes it doesn't. Where we come to the board for extenuation of those non-conforming circumstances in a vertical fashion. This home was owned by someone else prior to the current applicant. The aerials between the city's contracting and even Google do not have that window of time. That's when COVID was. When we're in that approximate window of 3 years, but we don't have, there was not a demolition permit filed by the previous owner of the property of when that garage was demolished. It shows up on the survey. I wanted to make a point too. Could you go back to, it was actually exhibit that the neighbor submitted, which is from the view. That's great. There we go, right there. Perfect. Okay, so these are from the same survey. And the document that you see before you is a restrictive covenant in regards to the view corridor for the property next door, which is new construction. So it's the same survey, same date, because this is for preservation of this line right here. So the people who owned this house, built this house, sold this house to our client. When they did that with the intention of demolishing the garage, establishing this preserved view corridor from their house. So this is a future document from the same survey date as the existing date on the survey submitted. That makes sense. So they were going through the machinations of getting this set up so they could build their house, sell this, demolish that, move forward. That all happened within this 3-year time. So what we're doing here, could you go to the floor plan, please? The proposed floor plans. We could just go to the first floor. Right there, that's great. Okay. So existing house on the left, large concrete pad as it sits out front, little notch right here. So and this is the existing covered porch. What's also not shown here is a carport. And then we have the previous footprint of the garage right here. So the proposal is simply squaring off this, and then this is the southwest face. So extending the porch, as we do in Charleston, on many of our piazzas, to help with the battery setting sun. So making a larger front porch that matches this hardscape outline and simply filling in this notch right here. This falls within, or let me say, outside of the setback for this property line falls here down the driveway. So this is happening within an area that you can build it. This, like a lot of the houses on this street, when the zoning was overlaid, they were immediately non-conforming because the setback lines were closer than what you needed here for the zoning. So this, what we're asking for is extenuation vertically of this, to take it from a 1.5 story to a 2.5 story, which is compliant with zoning, and basically we're modernizing an older home for families. So I'll be happy to answer your questions that you may have. Yes, ma'am.
Since this is a special exception, did y'all address any impacts to light and air to the adjacent neighbors in your
So
location?
we've got windows and privacy set up. There's an adjacent garage that's happening over here. So we worked within those same confines, and we did our best job as we normally do when we work on projects like this. They have a tight view corridor here. We're adding one story that's still having the sloped roof here with the dormers, so we were very sensitive to that. So we're not really, the way that light comes in, as you can see, this is the northern side. So you're not getting any direct sunlight from this direction. So as the sun passes here, sort of preserving that light because we're not blocking any coming in here. These are very tight lots too, as you can see, they're quite regimented. These are also a strip of the shorter lots that are on the block. They start to get much deeper as you get down the street. And again, just for reference, the view preservation corridor is from this house here. So that's where the garage used to be. This is us. You can see the concrete here, just adding a porch here, which is in line with the neighbors. Little notch right there.
And the new house to the east is it 1.5, 2, is it 2.5 stories?
I think it's technically a 2.5 story, ma'am, because you do have, you can see you have this, would be the stair override, and you do have a little bit of space up here. So I'd imagine it's probably one room and then a walk-in attic. If I had a X-ray vision through the walls, that's probably what that is. You see others around here that kind of do this.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. We'll hear from opposition at this point. Please state your name and address.
My name is J.C. Raffle, and I own 2320 Sunnyside Avenue. And I've been there for 20 years. And I wanted to make a comment on the property next to 2318 on the east side. That was built from the ground up. It was an empty lot. It was actually a graveyard. Then on the other side of 2320, the large house, that was, they donated their house and then built from the ground up. And their lot is significantly bigger than our two lots. The reason I sent the comments to the board in the first place was about the garage, because I looked at what they submitted, and I've been there a long time, and that garage was taken down somewhere back before, in the range of like 2019, and I am 100% certain, and I did dig a little more to find the exact date, but so I felt like the boundary lot survey that was submitted, even though they're saying, okay, it was at the same time, it shows that the other property hasn't even been constructed yet. But our biggest concern is that the intensity of the project in being 3.25 feet away from the adjoining property line is a bit aggressive. And the other buildings within like a quarter-mile radius that are brick, they have done like beautiful extensions, but I don't know of any that just went straight up a story and a half. There's already boundary issues. There's, and I know it's not for this board to hear all that, but basically it would block our sunlight, it blocks the airflow. The rainwater and stormwater drainage right now is the issue. With that magnitude of a house, it's really going to be an issue. And we just think it'll fundamentally change the character of the property. I know this neighborhood has all different kinds of homes, but in the end, I feel like it's going to negatively affect the quality of our air, light, quality of life, and access. And I really thank you so much for your time and consideration. Thank you.
Anyone else here in opposition? We'll hear from the applicant again, opportunity for rebut.
As stated in our application, this is a reduction from 43% to 41%. So we do not have any negative impacts on the stormwater. And as I pointed with the solar modeling of the house, we have no direct impact on sunlight community. So we're very sensitive to that, the way that the roof neck was shaped. So we're doing our very best job at modernizing it. Any other questions? Thank you all.
Okay, we'll close the public portion. More discussion or questions for the applicant or
Lee, in that area, that's, are we looking at other homes that are 2.5 stories on the same street?
Yeah, you see the one right here that stands out, and on the other side of the subject property, there's another 2-story, 2.5-story home there. And then there are a few other ones on Sunnyside, but I would say most of the homes are 1-story or 1.5-story.
And I think Ms. Ripple's comment about those, at least one of those, the one next door, is it was built as a new structure. And I think the Preservation Society's point was this is a historic structure that's going to be significantly altered. So.
Lee, how does the carport play into the calculation?
That's an existing carport on the property.
I'm sorry for the lot coverage.
Oh, it's an existing building.
Okay.
In our way of looking at things, how we define buildings, so it does count.
Whether it's enclosed or not.
Whether it's enclosed or not, correct.
Thoughts? Further discussion?
I tend to agree with the light and air and the intensity of the building. As being a house, size of the house, the overall neighborhood of Wyman Terrace.
Particularly given it's 3 feet off the adjacent.
Right.
Can we go back and see the design? I personally think that keeps within character of what's down there. It looks like a typical home in that area.
Thoughts? Further discussion?
Yeah, I understand the need to expand for more room, but I think that, I mean, I agree with Ms. Richards that it's an intense expansion, considering the proximity of the neighbor in opposition.
I'm comfortable with increasing the intensity of the use of the property. I think with a little bit more work on some design and maybe some work with neighbors, something more acceptable related to lot coverage, like you mentioned, carport and some activities. I think a little bit more work. I think everybody can come to something that might be a lot more acceptable.
We move forward, to talk to the neighbors about, to try and work out.
Mr. Goodwin, I'm sorry, would you state that one more time? So you're making a motion for deferral to allow the applicant to discuss further, or were you?
Yeah, to discuss a less intensive, maybe working with the neighbors and what might be agreeable.
Okay. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion? To vote. We'll go in order. So that's
Aye.
Goodwin. Aye. So from a unanimous vote of 5-0, for deferral to allow the applicant to continue to work with the neighbor and address some light and air impacts. It passes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, the next item on our agenda is V39 Lord Ashley Drive, South Windermere, TMS number 421-05-00-078, zoned SR1, requesting a special exception under section 54-110 to allow a rear addition and front addition that extends a non-conforming 4.9-foot east side setback, 9 feet are required. Requesting also a variance from section 54-301 to allow a garage expansion with an 8-foot front setback, 25 feet are required. The owner applicants are Kent and Catherine Flanagan. Mr. Batchel.
This is a home in South Windermere. You can see on the zoning map that it has a odd shape to it. The house is on a curve, Lord Ashley, and it has I guess because of that, it has a larger front setback than many other homes on that street. And you'll see this even more when you see the view from the street of the existing house. Here's an aerial view. That doesn't really capture setback. So here's a view, Google Street View from Lord Ashley, and from what I can tell, the property line, front property line of this lot is approximately right in this location. So the distance between the front property line and the street pavement is quite extensive. I think it's about 15 feet, probably a little less, but that's quite a bit of space between the front property line and the street. And then you add to that the front setback of the existing house. So I say all that because one of their requests is to build this addition on the front corner where that garage is located, where that car is located. And they end up with a much smaller front setback. These are the site plans that the applicant provided their application, and they're actually requesting a variance to allow the garage expansion with an 8-foot front setback. In reality, there's a lot more space between this proposed addition and the street. I don't think that's going to ever change. And you can see the odd way the right-of-way and the street pavement wrap around this lot. So that's one thing I'll point out. The other aspect of this request is that they want to basically extend the non-conforming side setback over on this side of the property. Currently, the closest corner of the house is 4.9 feet from that east side property line. Their closest corner of their proposed addition would be 4.9 feet as well. So that would be a special exception to extend that front setback. It's a one-story addition. This is the existing garage, and this is what they would be adding to it. More shots of the existing house. So that's probably the best view. Again, it's a one-story addition. It's like the house, and I'm not aware of any objections or concerns to this. It seems like a reasonable request given the shape of the lot, and what this addition will accommodate is a larger garage, I guess, they can use. And they'll still have plenty of driveway behind that front of the garage to park a car on the outside without impacting the street. So seems like a reasonable request to me, and I recommend it.
All right, thank you, Lee. Do we have anybody here this evening to speak in opposition to the application for 9 Lord Ashley Drive? You're in opposition. All right, seeing no one in opposition, do we have the owner applicants here? All right, anything you'd like to say to the board? Any questions for the owners applicants? Your motion? All right, Ms. Grass moves to approve. Ms. Richards seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes unanimously 5-0 with Mr. Bennett recusing himself and the special exception and the variance for 9 Lord Ashley Drive are granted. Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda is B4, 114, 116, and 118 East Bay Street, Charlestown, TMS number 458-09-04-022, zoned LB, requesting a special exception under section 54-511 to allow an eating and drinking establishment with 618 square feet of interior patron use area and 414 square feet of outside patron use area without 9 off-street parking spaces required by the ordinance. Proposed use requires 11 spaces. Building is grandfathered for 2 spaces for prior retail use. The owner is Burnett R. Maybank III. Applicant is Theron Sandy II. Mr. Batchelder.
Just point out one thing right off the bat. So this says the building is grandfathered for 2 spaces for prior retail use. I'll say that I should have put the space is grandfathered for 2 spaces for prior retail use, because this application concerns, I guess, 3/4 of the existing building on this lot, this property, and 1/4 of that building roughly is occupied by the Tavern Liquor Store, which has been there for a long time. And of course, that's a retail use, and they're required to provide a certain number of spaces based on the size of that store. The rest of the space that we're dealing with tonight, 114, 116, 118 East Bay, that's been a retail use. And so that space, 114, 116, 118 East Bay, is grandfathered for 2 parking spaces under the retail use that it's had for many years. And so that's what I meant by saying that. And but what they're proposing to do is convert that retail space into what we would term in the zoning ordinance an eating and drinking place, restaurant, bar, whatever. And they would have 618 square feet of interior patron use area. That's area where the patrons can be. And that does not include the bathrooms. And then they're also proposing 414 square feet of outside patron area, where again, patrons, tables, chairs, that sort of thing could be. And that's on their property. And you'll recall that we heard an application earlier this year concerning 116 and 118 East Bay. That application did not include 114. That was a separate retail space and separate retail business at that time. But that business has gone away, and now this applicant is proposing to expand their existing operations into the 114 East Bay Street site, and then convert the use from retail to this eating and drinking establishment. So here's the property, East Bay Street between Exchange Street and East Elliott Street. Aerial view showing the location. Skip that. And and the applicant's materials that they submitted. So they've submitted these plans and very nicely put the square footages of the patron area on the plans, 682 square feet inside, and then the 414 square feet of space outside, and this little courtyard in the back corner of the property. And then they've got an existing bathroom. They're proposing to add a second bathroom. And so these would be the bathrooms. They've got some storage, some back of house space, and then also, of course, they're proposing to include their retail shelving in there as well. And so that's it. That is the request. And making this change requires more parking spaces under the city zoning ordinance and retail use. That's typical of what we see when we see what was retail space being converted to restaurant and bar space. It happens, of course, quite a bit on King Street, happens a little bit on Broad, and we end up with these parking issues that we have to deal with somehow. And in this case, we've got a property that's zoned limited business, so it's commercially zoned, but it happens to be on the fringe of the commercial area of downtown. And the change that is being proposed requires your approval to grant a special exception for them to have this change without providing the required parking spaces. And again, we go back to the issue of what the test is, and let me just open that up and read that to you. So, the number of off-street parking spaces required by this chapter shall not be reduced, except with the approval of the Board of Zoning Appeals on a determination by the board that the enforcement of the required number of spaces would prevent reasonable use of the lot. In making the determination, the Board of Zoning Appeals shall consider each of the following: whether the proposed use is an allowed use, but the whole zoning district. In this case, this proposed use is allowed. Whether the existing building as configured on the lot or the existing building as configured on adjoining lots make it feasible to provide off-street parking. Whether a street frontage of an existing lot is so limited that a driveway for access to a parking area would unreasonably or impractically reduce the area available for occupancy by structures. I think this site, this property, is one of those properties that just simply doesn't provide much off-street parking. I think there's an existing parking space, maybe two, accessed off of Exchange Street, right next to the tavern. But in my opinion, those spaces are allocated for zoning purposes to the tavern. I don't care who uses them, but I think the presence of those spaces means that the tavern is not a non-conforming retail use because it doesn't provide the parking. I think it does provide parking. So that's, and the property certainly provides some parking, and so I think those spaces go with the tavern. So I think in this case, this conversion is looking to seek your special exception approval to not provide all the required parking that would be in addition to what is required for the retail use already. And so that's the way I've worded this on the agenda. And so in that case, we're left with a shortfall of 9 spaces. So I think 2 and 3, because of the configuration of building on the lot and making it impossible to provide parking, I think those conditions are met. 4, whether granting the special exception will adversely affect neighboring properties. And then 5, whether the applicant has pursued good faith efforts to provide off-street parking. Well, on that point, I'll say that I didn't think that they would be able to provide the off-street parking through the required long-term lease that he required. 10 years is a minimum term for that lease. And it's become extremely difficult to find anybody that would tie up their property for that period of time in the lower part of the peninsula. So, so they were not able to find the leased parking on a 10-year lease term to meet that requirement for off-site for parking. And so they're seeking your approval for this special exception as a result. And so that brings us to the point of whether the grant of the special exception will adversely affect neighboring properties. And I know that there's been a lot of comment in favor and opposed to this. And you've seen those comments in your public information packet. But I feel like this conversion, and I know that the operator probably is doing a great job and is well-liked, obviously, by a lot of people down there. But can't think about this in terms of who's operating it today, because that will change. And we don't have control over who operates it. We don't have control over whether they do a nice job or operate some different type of use that's maybe not so attractive to the people who live there, who do support this. So I caution people against putting too much stock in that. I think you got to just look at the use itself and what the potential impacts are. And to me, this kind of a use is clearly a more intensive use than a retail use. You're dealing with food and beverages and all the issues that creates, deliveries, pickups of garbage and recycling. And this is an area that, like I said, is on the fringe of the commercial district. And it's not like we don't have enough bars and restaurants downtown for people to go to. So, you know, I'm concerned about the impact of this kind of a use in that area and the long-term impact over the years to come from this type of use. And so I tend to agree with the neighbors who are in the immediate area who are not in favor of this and the points that they bring up. And for that reason, I would not be supportive of the application being approved tonight.
Okay, thank you, Lee. If you're here in opposition to the application on East Bay Street, will you please just raise your hand? All right. So we'll hear from the proponents first, the applicant and the owner, and our procedure says that we have 10 minutes per side, okay? I'm not going to hold you to 10 minutes per side, but I do ask that you respect the time that other people have here, including your board, who is made up of volunteers helping the city, and those who are around you who probably feel just as strongly as you do about the issue, whether they agree or not. And so if I ask for you to wrap it up, I hope you won't feel offended. I'm not attacking you personally. I'm just trying to move the process along. So we'll try to give everybody an opportunity to speak. We'll try to let everybody air out their opinion, and we'll try to move forward in an orderly way. Mr. Maybank, you have the floor first.
All right, I'm Bernie Maybank. I'm here as both the lawyer for the applicant and the owner of the property. We brought a number of supporters just because you'll have a agenda, and we've asked them not to come and take the microphone and speak in favor of it. They have, many of them have posted online, and they're here today because if you want to hear from them, I know your time is extremely valuable. So we're here today for a parking variance. As y'all recall from our original application, and we've been working on this project by since 2019. Our original application, our motion for reconsideration, at the last meeting, we all seemed to agree that this was a step to go. This would solve the issue that we have. And so we're here basically applying for a restaurant, as we all seemed to agree last time was a good idea. And I would point out the obvious, we've been zoned for a restaurant longer than anyone in this room has been alive. The protesters, and we have a number of those today, they moved to Charleston a few years ago. We've been zoned for a restaurant before they were even born. And if they had such a problem with being next to a restaurant, they shouldn't have bought that particular property. Just to give you a little bit of gloss of what Lee said, the property is actually fairly small, and the restaurant is tiny. So on going down East Bay Street to the left-hand side is a tiny liquor store, the Tavern. We're claiming it's the oldest liquor store in North America. And if you're gonna claim it's that old, don't say America, say North America, so that's what we claim. The second one on the first floor is a high-end wine store, and so it sells beer and wine. It's a pricey kind of high-end sort of joint. And the third one is what we're here today on. It's only got 641 square feet of interior space, and it used to be for many years, used to be a little antique store that would sell basically bric-a-brac, and pretty good little traffic. And Theron is going to run, who will speak after me, he's going to run all three of those particular establishments. On the top of the building is my apartment. So I live directly above, and my living room is directly above the proposed restaurant. So and at my age, I don't hear a bunch of loud noises and partying and stuff of that nature. But the parking exception, the parking variance does have special exceptions, and as Lee indicated, just to get a little slightly more long, the first requirement is when the permit, what you're applying for is a permitted use. As I mentioned, we've been zoned as a restaurant before any of y'all are ever born. The second of all, does the building lot allow off-street parking? And like virtually everything in south of Broad and a lot higher up than that, there's no off-street parking at this particular location. The third was, can you build a driveway? And obviously, you can't do that. Fourth of all, does it affect neighboring properties? And the neighboring properties, there have been retail establishments there my entire life. There have been people coming and shopping at these three buildings. It used to be a barber shop, always been a liquor store. Then there was an antique store. So there's been people driving and parking there my entire life. So in that sense, a tiny little 641 square foot restaurant is going to be served sandwiches. Who's going to drive to go get a sandwich? Not many people are going to go drive and go buy a sandwich. And then lastly, is there a good faith effort to provide parking? There is 2 parking garages within about 400 feet of us, and there's metered parking. And we're going to give, I forget exactly what you're calling them, a strip where you can go out and read the parking meter, or you can go into the parking garage. And so we will provide parking to our customers. There are a number of protests that a lot of supporters online. And by the way, both the protesters and the supporters, we got kind of cut off on posting online, I think because of Labor Day. So I'm sure there would have been other protests and other supports online, but they were issued for that. But the only thing that we're here today for is parking. Now, the city has an excellent track record of granting parking variances for restaurants. Directly across the street from us is Bank One, vastly larger than our establishment. Ode, which is a restaurant right around the corner on Broad Street, vastly larger than us. Their bars are bigger than our entire establishment. Sorrel's, which is a very popular Italian restaurant, which just opened, and it's right across the street from a number of restaurants, a number of residents on King Street. Takes you 2 months to get a reservation, which will show you how popular it is. And there's probably 10 to 15 restaurants within walking distance on East Bay and Broad. One reason the city has been so flexible and reasonable about granting parking variances is there are 2 large parking garages. There are numerous meter parking. The old Exchange building has a meter parking lot with, I haven't counted them, but I'd say probably 12 to 20 parking spots, which again is directly across the street from us. So none of the people who are protesting here today protested Bank One, Oak, or Sorrel. So Sorrel just opened maybe four months ago. They're here today to protest a tiny 641 square foot building owned by locals and managed by locals, and they didn't protest the vastly larger Bank One, the vastly larger Oak, or Sorrel's. And so, in that vein, they have the Printers Road does have a protest resolution, which doesn't even mention parking. If we were in circuit court today rather than zoning appeal, it would even be invisible, it would be irrelevant. There's no reference to a problem with parking in their particular resolution. Now, left unsaid, or maybe sad in some, if nobody wants another Blind Tiger. This restaurant is directly underneath my living room. Like, I want a Blind Tiger underneath my living room. Now, Blind Tigers, the problem with Blind Tigers is, that's why everybody goes during the hurricane, by the way. If nobody wants college kids drinking liquor, nobody wants loud music, nobody wants a boisterous atmosphere, and we're certainly not going to have that here. We're not applying for a liquor license. We don't have music. And back when we were allowed to sell beer and wine by the glass, we didn't have a single issue on Blind Tiger at the wine store. No college kids came in boisterously raising a ruckus and enjoying themselves, in part because we just sell expensive wine. A couple of college kids are not going to buy a $15 glass of Cabernet. That's just not the way they run. And so we don't expect the wine store's been open for about 2 years. We don't expect if they never came into the wine store, they're not likely going to come into a tiny 641 square foot restaurant. And I'm not sure how much 641 square feet is. It probably is a quarter just the size of the space where y'all are. So we don't expect a Blind Tiger, and I'm against Blind Tiger as much as anyone. Even if it wasn't under my living room, I would still be opposed to Blind Tiger. But that simply hadn't happened in the wine store in 2 years. We haven't had a single incident in a wine store in 2 years, and so we don't expect it to happen on behalf of the restaurant. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our few minutes, Farron, who's our his manager.
Thank you, Mr. Maybank.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you letting me speak. My name is Theron Sandy. I'm the business owner. I just wanted to clarify a few things as well. I know, Lee, it's hard to kind of base your decision on the current owner because there is a possibility that it could be sold. But I am the current owner. I am the petitioner for this. I would really appreciate it if you base it on my credentials, not some crazy person who might own it in the future. I don't know. We're not planning on selling it. Bernie gave me a 25-year lease, lease with options. So he did that on purpose because this business stays in families. It doesn't switch hands. Just to clarify a few things as well, we're the same business as the liquor store on the corner. All we're doing is expanding to offer other stuff. We wanted to be able to offer beer and wine and food, right? Now, we're not going to have a grease trap. DHEC doesn't require us to have one. I've already talked to DHEC. They've come, they've done their preliminary inspections. We're not going to be selling that type of food. Everything we have, I've told you guys before, we're working with Callie's Hot Little Biscuit, Carrie Mooring. She's amazing. I used to represent them when I was practicing law. I've wound down my practice since then. And she's working with us to create a menu. She says she's the queen of small space without a hood and stuff like that, and she really is. And she's working with us to create a menu that you can grab and go, or if you want to sit there and eat, we have a few tables outside. You'll be able to sit outside and eat there as well. Now, I want to remind everyone why we're here. At our last meeting, we are a retail store. We just are, okay? That's what we do. 90% of our sales are all taken off our site and consumed or used, t-shirts, whatever they are, right? So that's what I classify our business as. at our previous meeting, at the direction of the zoning administrator and at the board, you guys suggested that, I remember the conversation, I actually went back and watched some of the videos. It was suggested that the better path for us would be to pursue a restaurant. And that's what we did. We said, okay, well, I don't, we're selling food. If you want to classify us as a restaurant, fine, we'll be a restaurant. But that's such a small percentage of our sales. But if it's the better use, that's what we'll do. So that's what we did. It was my understanding that that would get us closer to what we would want to be able to do. Everyone knows we don't have parking. This building was built prior to when cars were invented. So they didn't think about cars when they built these buildings downtown. We are ahead of the game. There's a business right beside us that has no parking that probably has 50 tables. We're going to probably have, well, I think this shows, this is actually, my architect put this many tables in there. We're not going to have that many tables, but that's showing our tables. So if you compare that to the business across the street that has 50 or 100 tables, I don't know how many they have a ton, they have 0 parking. We actually have 2 spaces. Not only that, our plan is to validate parking. So I've reached out to ABM, who manages all the parking garages for the city of Charleston. I've talked to them. They said that I'm able to buy vouchers. Everyone who comes in, I can provide them with a voucher. It will pay for their parking. So we're on the wait list for parking spaces at the garages. The wait list is 2-3 years. So my solution was, well, hey, we can still pay for the parking. It's just not our spot, right? So everything we do, all of our advertisements, everything will say that we validate parking. We're also going to have an option for smart cards. I actually went and picked one up today just to see what it was about. The city of Charleston sells smart cards, and they're $5 each, and you can load them with prepaid parking. And those work at meters. So if someone comes in and says, hey, we parked at a meter, we'll give them a smart card. If they park in the garage, we'll give them a voucher for up to 2 hours, which is what the city provides people when they provide free parking. So, and within our building, we have 2 parking, within 400 feet of our building, we have 2 parking garages. There's so much parking around us. There's lots, there are, metered spaces everywhere. Not only that, our employees don't park in our parking spaces. We have additional parking for them that we provide them, which is on Elliott Street. Now, I'll say this as well. Over the past month, I had my staff do an informal survey of our visitors. And I said, I want you to ask every person you can, how did they get here? And less than 0.5% of people that came into our store actually drove. No one drives to our store. All of our customers are people that are downtown and people that are walking by, tourists that are walking around, stuff like that. That's where our clientele comes from. And I'll say this real quick, off-street parking requirements, I'm going to qualify myself. I have an LLM, which is an advanced law degree in real property development, okay? Off-street parking requirements are actually kind of an archaic way of thinking. And I think the city is actually kind of realizing that. Because what happens is the people that are complaining about traffic and congestion, well, when you require off-street parking, guess what? Everyone's going to drive to your store. So they're going to try to find parking. That's going to cause more traffic and congestion than anything. A lot of cities like Austin, other cities around America, and even Charleston on King Street have done away with those types of requirements. But real quick, our business, we're very resilient. We've been through, the liquor store that's there has been through pirate attacks, revolutionary wars, civil wars, earthquakes, hurricanes. This has been a lot for us. We've stood through it all, and we've done everything we can. We've reached out to every person. I have personally tried to reach out to every single person who has opposed us to address their concerns, and not a single one of them called me back. You will notice that the Charleston Neighborhood Association does not oppose us. Last time, at our last hearing, you were told that they did. It wasn't true. This time, we have 2 board members that actually support us. And so, we have a lot of support out there. And I'm sure, as y'all probably know, it's a lot more difficult to get supporters to keep showing up to these meetings on our behalf than it is for people that are against us. They're going to continue to show, but our supporters are still here. They're still here to support us. And so with that, I ask that you approve our application for special exception. It's the only way that building, which has been commercial forever, probably one of the oldest buildings in our country, is going to be able to continue to be commercial, because parking's not going to just show up. So that's where we're at. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sandy. Are there others who wish to speak in favor of the application? Anyone else here in favor? Yes, sir, Mr. Pritchard.
It's not often that I disagree with my friend, Mr. Batchelder, but I do in this instance, as someone who has been on this board for 10 years or longer. I have applied this special exception test many times. And I think this particular application actually meets the test. If it were a zoning application, I probably wouldn't support it. Okay, because the precedent is set, but it's not a zoning application, it is a special exception, which is a different animal under the zoning ordinance. And I live on 12 Trash Street, so I live right on the corner. I have, this word's gonna hurt coming out. I've been there 61 years. And I know the neighborhood. I watched every transformation for the last 6 decades up and down that street, and up and down East Bay, up and down Trad, the whole area. You know, for those of you that were around long enough, there were actually 2 gas stations on either side of it. There are now townhomes. There was, but I think that the real issue is the tragic loss of sort of these little commercial spaces in our neighborhoods. That's how Charleston used to be. And this is one of the last vestiges of that era. Where we have opportunities for Burbage's and Tavern. And I could rattle off 10 dozen businesses just like this that we've lost over the years. And I don't see this as being a park issue. I really don't. Having watched that neighborhood develop, having been there, I know the business, and it is a foot traffic type business. And I just don't see it as being an issue that would really impact adversely the neighborhood. And since it meets the test, I think got to grant it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pritchard. Anyone else here in support of the application? Yes. Please state your name and address. Thank you.
Teresa Slade, and I live on New Street. And I'm here because I support this application, but also for consistency. This very board on the June 20 agenda had 37 Broad come up, and with a restaurant that was greater on the first floor and not enough parking downstairs. It's literally right around the corner. And so with the People's Building, which is residential right across the street. So for consistency purposes, legally, it seems to me that one is obligated to consider this and favorable. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Smythe. Anyone else here to speak in favor of the application? All right, next we'll hear from the opposition to the application, followed by a rebuttal. And if Mr. Hayes walks up to the podium, I'll remind you the primary issue that appears to be in dispute is whether the grant of the special exception will adversely affect neighboring properties. And so it'll be important when you come up, please state your name and your address for the record.
Sure, John Hayes, I live on 97 East Bay Street, right, and that's directly across from the applicant. I would like to go ahead and address the board, and those who were not here or were here before understand how do we get here before you today. Okay, there's a little bit of history to this. I think it's important. This is the parking. Don't worry, we'll get there. So when this endeavor to become a retail space first started coming up, neighbors, you can go to the next slide. Neighbors were not enthused about it. They didn't want a retail store selling beer and wine at this location. They've been a jewelry art store for many years. They approached, and I'm reading an email from Dan Miller, who is right here, the president of the HOA for Penrith Road, which is directly across, and Manny Hunger, and others, that I'll point this out, met with Mr. Sandy. And according to their recollection, during this email that was done shortly after, so last Saturday afternoon, Manny and I met with the owner of the liquor store, who was expanding into a new Street Bar. We spoke with the owner for almost 2 hours. Owner stated this will be a retail store with them offering some tastings of beer and wine. He stated it will not be a bar. He said he does not plan to have any type of seating inside the building. There was lots of discussion as to why the owner has applied for both on-site license and off-site license for sale of beer and wine. That's important because we could have objected to the state ABC, alcohol beverage control. Didn't. The owner stated he wants, you go back. The owner stated that he wants to offer beer, wine tastings inside the store. That's the reason he applied for the on-site license. Go to the next slide, please. Dan Miller, after having this conversation and many other neighbors, that I personally thought long and hard about this new proposed business venture. My gut tells me that based on the limited space inside the store being very small, and his verbal assurances to how he intends to run his new business, this new venture will have limited adverse impacts into our already busy and noisy SOB neighborhood. He chose not to object. Go ahead. Next. Mr. Unger said, Dan, thanks. I let Darren know that I was not filing a protest this morning. I'm hopeful we both made the right decision. Somebody else commented, I see the damage the bar can do, what I've read. But it's not computer to be a bar. The importance of that is, look, we have all the assurances in the world. Mr. Basho pointed out very well. They could change hands. They could have a different business model. They could do whatever. So there's nothing holding them to that. Okay? So go to the next slide, please. So what happened next after this? Nobody objected to the neighborhood. CO was issued by the city, and it said very frankly, it said they were issued a CO after conversation with Mr. Batchelder, and it said the CO for this place was free samples of beer and wine for on-site consumption inside the building shall be incidental retail sales. Tables and chairs for patrons shall not be permitted, which is what they're asking for today. It's a parking variance, but to get to what they want to do, they got to get through the parking variance. After that CO was issued, after all of this was gone through, a year later, you go to the next one, they got tables outside. There's alcohol being consumed on the premises. My understanding, they can go smell the cup. That's what it seems like. And Mr. Batchelder has to issue a letter. And it says, this letter is to advise you that your business, 116 East Bay Street, is in violation of the City of Charleston zoning ordinance. The use is restricted to retail use of the building. Tables and chairs for patrons shall not be permitted, but they were there. Sales of beer and wine and food for on-premise consumption and the installation of tables and chairs inside or outside clearly violates the city issued CO for the business. So when this was a retail, they had to get issued a warning by the city that they were already violating the restrictions that were put on them. Now, as far as retail and Mexican, retail versus bar restaurant, surrounding neighbors, there's a big difference between a retail versus a bar and restaurant. Harris Teeter's retail, a Little Cricket's retail, a gas station's retail. That doesn't mean it's a great idea to start packing a bunch of tables outside and selling alcohol and food. And there's a reason there is. And there's a reason there's different things for different variances. That's why they need more parking for a restaurant. You go to the next, please. The reason the variance should not be granted, parking is already extremely difficult and will be made worse. Most families who live near the tavern, I call it that, it's Rainbow Beer and Wine, same thing, must park on the street. We have families there. Even though it might be on the fringe, it's still a family neighborhood. They'll be primarily serving alcohol. It's not an appropriate commercial use for this location. We keep saying commercial use. This place has been retail for, Mr. Maymack said, all those opposed have only been here for a few years and they shouldn't move next to a restaurant. We didn't move next to restaurant number one, and I've been here for at least 12 years in the address that I have. I didn't purchase my house next to a restaurant. There wasn't a restaurant there. You got more garbage and trash cans on the street. You got smells generated by a restaurant, more noise. Rainbow Road, that area, that fringe that we're talking about, already bears the brunt of the tourism and parking issues and problems with people on the sidewalk. It is already have an issue. And I've, heard mention about LeBlanc or Bank One, whichever you want to refer to it as. Yeah, since they have opened, we've had more parking issues. A lot more parking. So this would even make it tougher. We didn't oppose a wine and beer retail store, but this is different. There's no hardship. This place has been a retail store for a while. You go to the next slide, please. Let's look who's impacted. There's a petition that the applicants put forward and some letters. And I might be off on my numbers, one or two, but let's break down. Because it does say adjacent in the statute as far as the elements. Well, call it adjacent, call it proximity. The red dots are families opposed. And 30 homeowners adjacent are opposed to this variance in the bar for parking and other reasons, but mainly parking. 6 homeowners adjacent to it support it. So that's 83% of the people that are directly adjacent, to which the elements or the ordinance speaks to. So those are the people that will be affected. If you would go to the next slide, please. So petition, 30 families adjacent to the title. Now, supporters for the petition that the applicant has put forward. Out of all those, I took the petition, and I took the letters, and had my office, and that's my ability myself, looked through it. And 47 homes are actually not duplicative and have actual addresses that are on that petition. As Bay might talk about in the circuit court. Well, 47 of those will not hold up. Out of those 47, they say support them. 41 of those homes are not adjacent to the tower. And out of those 41 homes, 26 of those homes are over half a mile away. That is 880 yards away, or 9 football fields. So, I mean, some of those people might be walking 9 football fields to get a bottle of wine, but I think their own petition shows that they're driving there. The next slide. Here we have an example of the petition for the support they showed, and I mentioned that. We have duplicative addresses. You got 5 people, 1 of 5 each day. I don't think there's 5. Well, anyways, you count as 1 no matter what, but I don't know where the 5 people live there. They're 2 doors down from me. Next slide. If you look at the resolution, by Fritters Road, there are at least two that were on their petition that have rescinded that. And as far as the parking goes, I'll show you examples of what it's like now and how it's going to get worse. If you go to the next slide. I mean, here you have, this is directly across from the proposed restaurant bar. You got these trucks right here. Next slide, please. There it is at night, so it's not just a daytime thing. Next slide, please. You got people making deliveries. Next slide, please. And this shows us right in front of Penrose Road, right across the street. Next slide, please. Another nighttime view of the parking issues there. Next slide. You got your tequila truck, beer truck right behind you. So, if you go to the next slide, please. To sum it up, and I'm going to let Mr. Wilson talk more to the elements and what's needed. But as far as the parking variance goes, you got 30 owners that are directly adjacent that are against it. They don't want it. It's going to impact their life. It's going to impact their quality. There's no need for it. It'll be a substantial detriment to adjacent property, public good, and character of the neighborhood. Please let us keep the character of our neighborhood. Again, going back to my letter, as far as being a good steward, as far as assurances, cities already had advised them that they were in violation of the city's zoning ordinance by selling beer and wine and putting it out on the table. And I don't think that can be overlooked. I don't think anybody's assurances, whether they're gonna be good or that they're gonna keep the place clean or any of this should be taken into effect, but if it was, we've already had, this issue come up. So I would just like to thank the board for taking time to let me speak. I would move that, or ask that the board do not grant this variance. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. Anyone else in opposition would like to speak? Come on up and please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, and thank you for taking the time to hear from the owners of the East Bay and Elliott regime. My name is Robert Bowen. I'm going to be brief as I can possibly be. I reside at 102 East Bay Street, one of the units known as the East Bay and Elliott regime, which is adjacent to the property in question. My wife and I have owned a home south of Broad for nearly 20 years. At the East Bay and Elliott regime, there are 9 units with 18 residents, all owner occupied, 3 of which are on East Elliott, 3 on East Bay, and 3 on Boise's Wharf. I'm the current president of East Bay and Elliott regime, and I'm speaking tonight for myself as well as the other 8 unit owners, most of whom are not currently in Charleston, but all of whom support my comments. Several of these owners also have sent letters to the zoning board for this or past appeals related to this site. We are all requesting that this appeal be denied. Rules and regulations exist for a reason. What we have here is a request to waive rules, not because the rules are no longer valid, or not because the rules pose a hardship, but because the applicant wants to substantially change the nature and usage of the property in question, even though the property has other potential uses that would result in far less disturbance to the neighborhood, if any, and not require a waiver of the existing rules. Each day it is those who live close by that will be inconvenienced by the added congestion, noise, trash, and additional parking availability issues, which are already acute. We are the ones with the largest vested interest, not those who might walk by or stop occasionally. The applicant's desires to redefine the nature of the establishment to his benefit at the inconvenience of the neighborhood. Most importantly, we do not believe that serving food and alcohol outdoors at this location in any way improves the character and culture of this neighborhood. This specific area needs the utmost protection by any regulatory means available to maintain the character, culture, and well-being of this neighborhood. Again, thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen. Anyone else here to speak in opposition? Please state your name and address, sir.
My name is Nelson Hicks, and I live at 109 East Bay, and I've lived there for a quarter of a century. And we've seen considerable change down there in the parking in that period of time. I represent the Printers Row Board of Directors and the 18 owners at Printers Row, the vast majority of which are strongly opposed to the special exception request for 118, 116, and 140. John Hayes stole some of my thunder, so I'm going to make it a little on the brief side, which I'm sure doesn't hurt anybody's feelings. But during the 25 years that I've lived here, the parking situation has drastically deteriorated with increased congestion and lack of local spaces for the residents. We are concerned with customers that return to their cars after drinking and causing a safety concern in the neighborhood, that the increased traffic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. As some of you may or may not know, Printers Row was converted from a factory atmosphere in the mid-'80s to condominiums. And in the mid-'80s, no one worried too much about traffic and parking. So there is no internal parking at Printers Row, and all 18 owners and guests are at the mercy of the neighborhood to finding spaces for parking. So it is an issue for the residents in the neighborhood, for sure. Just recently, a neighborhood lot has been leased by a construction company rehabbing the old Arbor Club. And presumably, they leased the lot for their employee parking. At least two of our owners in the building at Printers Row have been told to leave their previously leased parking spots. Special exception parking, as far as we're concerned, must be turned down by our zoning board to protect our neighborhood's ability to park near their homes. Printers Row did in fact have a resolution out to its owners, and they strongly oppose a special exception of parking, in addition to the issues that have previously been mentioned about a bar and a restaurant in the area. I wish to emphasize a picture that John Hayes showed. And this is a color photo of that beer truck sitting in front of Printers Row, of which there are trucks daily in that area. And that particular parking spot where the beer truck seems to unload is where we're at Printers Row have a spot that's reserved for unloading our groceries. So this is an issue. In conclusion, we at Printers Row strongly oppose the request for special exception. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Anyone else here to speak in opposition? Yes, sir. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Kevin Mooney. I live at 21 East Elliott Street. My house directly looks into the backyard of the location that's looking for the variance, and I strongly oppose it. I do park on the street. Sometimes I have to park 3-4 blocks away. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes circling around. Parking is very congested down there. Traffic's very bad. More importantly, maybe not quite as important to y'all, this would dramatically affect the enjoyment of our house. We raised our 2 daughters there. It's home. Like a light resident, a light retail use, as it's been for 13 years we've lived there. These buildings have been occupied. There's no hardship by declining this to the owners of the building. There is definitely hardship to the people who live nearby, and I appreciate your consideration. I hope that you will vote to oppose it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Anyone else in opposition? Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Can you hear me okay? James Wilson with Wobble Bond Dickinson, here on behalf of my client, Mr. Hayes, and several other neighbor property owners. The ultimate question for this board, of course, is whether this request satisfies the test. So that's what I want to really focus on. First of all, this property is not a particularly unusual or extraordinary property. As this board well knows, there are lots of properties in Charleston like this that have limited or no on-street parking. A lot of them are grandfathered in as commercial uses. A lot of them have to go fines if it's parking when they want to change uses. Many of you are familiar with all of that. Zoning rules were meant to apply to this property and others. Of course, if there is a test, then it should be entitled to a variance or special exception. But lots of other properties apply for this and have been denied. Yes, sometimes this board does grant a request, but it denies it a lot of times. So the applicant suggested that, oh, well, everybody gets this. This board knows that not everybody gets this. So the particular language of 54.511, I just want to read it just to really emphasize it. The board has to make a determination that the enforcement of the required number of parking spaces would prevent reasonable use of the lot. So you have to make a determination that enforcement of this requirement would prevent reasonable use. We do not believe that that hurdle is satisfied. As applicants described, this property has been a commercial property for decades, maybe centuries. It can continue to be a commercial property for the next century or more. Everybody knows, familiar with Tavern liquor store, Geist Jewelers was there as long as I can remember, for a long time. So retail, commercial uses, those are allowed to continue all day long. The applicant actually said that 90% of their business is retail. That can continue all day long, carry on. The applicant is now asking for a new use, and to get that approved by you all, they need to show that this test is satisfied. And the test is the required number of spaces. If you enforce that, would prevent reasonable use of a lot. On its, just by definition, there is a very reasonable use that's gone on for decades and decades. That's not being prevented. The second point from the 54-511 Mr. Batchelor addressed is that you need to consider whether this proposal will adversely affect neighboring properties. And that test is really a focus on the neighboring properties. It's not a citywide sort of vote, whether folks half a mile away or even several blocks away are, for it or against it. It's not a vote. It's not counting people for or against. And we can kind of hash over the details of how many people in right here are for or against it. But the question is, will it adversely affect neighboring properties? We've heard from a number of the residents who absolutely believe it will. There are many homes, as we all know, in Charleston that rely on on-street parking. And it's already tough in a lot of places, including this. But this would make it worse. It would aggravate the situation. These are real impacts. Restaurants and bars have more impact generally than retail. That's why there's a heightened requirement. Outdoor spaces, all as requested here, also have impact. And that's why there are provisions in the code dealing with outdoor spaces. There's actually, as you all are familiar with, a zoning district called commercial transitional that flat out prohibits, not even a special exception for an outdoor eating and drinking area within 150 feet of residential area. That's just analogous. That's not applicable here. The point is, that's a real concern that City Council in our zoning code has raised. So it's not just parking, it's noise, it's odors, it's garbage, it's congestion. The question is, will this use have an adverse effect on neighboring properties? And we believe it will. The neighborhood, of course, it's Rainbow Road, right? It's already under a tremendous amount of pressure from tourists and other uses. That should not be made worse by aggravating it. There's no reason why this can't continue. There's no reason, enforcing this requirement would not prevent reasonable use. We agree with Mr. Batchelor that the test is not satisfied, and we respectfully urge your denial of this request. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Anyone else here to speak in opposition to the request on East Bay? All right, with no one else here to speak in opposition, Mr. Maybank, would you like an opportunity for rebuttal?
I just have a brief rebuttal.
Yes, sir.
Well, we heard a lot from the protesters. Not a single one of them said they provide parking. They all park on the streets and take our spots. Residential no more entitled to parking than commercial is. Commercial property tax rate's actually 3.5 times higher than residential. They don't provide parking for anybody. Mr. Hicks had the audacity. He moved into they took a factory and converted, I forget what he said, 8 or 12 homes, and provide no parking at all. And you're here to complain today about us? When you moved into a big building and provided no parking for anybody? But anyway, that's what it is, and I repeatedly said that when they moved in, the zone residential wasn't before their time, it was before their parents' time. When their parents were alive, our restaurant, our location was before their parents were born, our property was zoned for a restaurant. If that's something that upset them so much, they shouldn't have moved in. Now, none of them have said anything about the parking in our restaurant. They've complained, as everybody does. I'd join them in a heartbeat. The parking in Charleston's gotten a lot tougher over the passage of time. But nobody said anything about our restaurant is going to do it, other than the fact that In some cases, restaurants have more traffic than a retail store. Who's going to be driving to buy a sandwich? I'm not saying that won't ever happen, but it's obviously not going to be going to be a lot more traffic than a building that was converted into 8 homes and didn't build a single garage or provide any parking whatsoever to anybody. You take my parking every day. But that doesn't seem to be a problem. We did have a lot of pictures of commercial trucks, but there is a commercial truck parking, dedicated spot for commercial trucks, and that's what you saw. Commercial trucks were legally parking in a commercial parking spot, unlike in Columbia where they park in the median every day and put their lights on every day. So again, if there was going to be these problems, they would have shown up in the wine store. There's been a single complaint about college kids going in, making trash, making noise, leaving their their wine ducks out or wine bottles out. Not one, and wine store been in business for 2 years. We didn't have a single testimony that there was a problem at the wine store, and the same people are going to be in the restaurant. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bebe. All right, Mr. Sandy, if you've got a couple words.
So I just want to address, our challenge through this whole thing has been false information that's been out there. And I met with the Historic Charleston Foundation. They're not here tonight, and there's a reason why. They're not going to take a side on this because they were getting a lot of information that wasn't true. And I spoke to them for about an hour on the phone today, and they confirmed that a lot of the stuff that they were hearing wasn't true based on what I was telling them. So, there have been things like we're going to have live music outside, stuff like that. It's just absolutely false. It's not true. Bernie is right. Right across the street from us, there is a commercial loading zone. That's what you saw in those pictures. Now, if Dan came to me, I reached out to every one of them several times. As a matter of fact, Dan answered his phone accidentally and hung up when it was me calling. Dan came to me and said, hey, we don't want those trucks parking in front of our building. I say, Dan, okay, no problem. I can probably work something out where they can come down, Exchange Street or something like that. No problem at all. Regarding trash, we're the only ones who have trash. We're actually working. Indigo Road is here tonight supporting us. We are working with Indigo Road to help them have trash on that corner because we're going to keep it clean. There have been issues with trash from day one there, and we have a lot of trash cans that we don't even use. So we're going to work with them. And I will say the PowerPoint that John presented to you guys is inaccurate. It's just not true. The number of dots, I counted them. I've got a spreadsheet going myself on who's for us, who's against us. It's just not true information. You talk about duplicates. He's counting husbands and wives when he puts those dots on there. I promise you that. And then when he says we were in violation, when we had sidewalk tables, and this is something that I think the homeowners should know as well, because I think a lot of people are here under false information. We had a proper permit from the zoning department to have sidewalk tables, okay? We got a letter from them saying that after review of your CO, we think that that it was issued in error, it should have never been issued, and we're gonna revoke it. Okay, no problem. We pulled the sidewalk tables at that time. We said no problem, but we applied, we went through the application process. I provided them with insurance. I had my architect draw the plans on the sidewalk, everything. And they said, you're good to go. Here's your permit. Jason Rowe issued it. Nothing is different than before. They keep complaining restaurant, bar. They want to characterize this as a bar. I know some of you have been in our location. We don't have a bar. There's no bar in our spot. I ask people when they walk in, what do we feel like when you walk in here? You feel like a retail store. Because that's what we are. That's what we have. We have retail shelves. Right now we have 3 leather chairs that people can sit at. And that's what we are. So, and this is a very, very important point I want to make. People that are complaining about parking, that we're taking up space downtown, they don't use paid metered spaces when they park. They have residential parking decals that they use to park in residential parking spaces. So our clients don't park in any of those spaces. It's illegal. They'll get towed. Our people park in metered spaces. They park in the garage. And again, we're going to pay for their parking. I'm actually probably going to, if it requires it, I will spend more on parking for them than what it would cost to lease the spaces if I could find them. I just can't find them. Our employees, again, don't park at our store. We have 2 spaces that are consistently vacant because no one drives to our store. No one parks there. So, and I will say this, there's already a noise ordinance in place. So if we violate that, we're going to be in trouble, right? I actually went and bought a very expensive decibel meter to test sound. And I walked in front of our store, and I walked to the other side of the street, I walked all the way around us, and the level of sound was exactly the same everywhere. Even when our door is wide open and our music on, because it's not very loud and it's jazz or something like that, you can't even hear it when you're standing right in front of our store. So the levels are exactly the same, and I've tested that myself. I've done everything I can to prove that, these falsities that are out there are exactly that, falsities. But I want to remind everyone too that, any use in that space is going to require parking, and there is none. We have the 2 spaces that currently belong to the liquor store that we're going to allow, we're the same business, so we're going to allow the business to use it. But so when he says that, it's not detrimental to the business, it absolutely is, because whatever goes in there is going to need parking. So, and I think our suggestion to validate parking is what everyone does. People that don't have parking, they validate parking. That's what we're going to do. We're going to advertise it, and we're going to be good neighbors. Even for people that have opposed us, we still are here. We're still going to be friendly with them. And I'll remind you, every building around us, the cigar shop doesn't have any trash. They have no parking. They serve on premise. They're a retail store. They're not a restaurant. They don't, they didn't have to change their use to restaurant to get this approved. One Raw doesn't have any parking. It's just all around us. That's what it is. And so, again, the building was built before cars were invented, and it's just, they didn't anticipate. So, but thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Sandy. Appreciate it. That'll end the rebuttal. Does anybody have any questions for the owner, the applicant, or the opposition? As you're thinking about it, yeah, go ahead, Ms. Grass.
You did have one hand up over here.
May I offer a rebuttal?
No. No. So, Ms. Grass, do you have questions?
I just want clarification. So is there any indoor seating for the restaurant?
We'll have we'll have a little bit of seating. We'll have leather chairs and stuff like that. So for people that we'll have a small table in one area, and you can pull up the diagram.
That's out the one table, but the majority is outdoor seating.
Yes, ma'am. And that space is completely contained. So it's not open or anything. It's completely contained by a fence.
All right, so let me just recap a few things that I think the board needs to be mindful of. And I was, first of all, the city has recommended denial of the special exception request because of a factor that we are required as a board to consider, which is whether the grant of the special exception will adversely affect neighboring properties. The other issue I was hoping that somebody would discuss, Mr. Wilson finally got around to it. Thank you, Mr. Wilson, which was reasonable use. And that's the threshold determination that we have to make. And in making the determination on reasonable use, we have to consider the factors. But the special exception may be granted only upon a determination by the Board of Zoning Appeals that the enforcement of the required number of spaces would prevent reasonable use of a lot. And what is reasonable use? I can tell you from an appraisal standpoint, there's a term called highest and best use. And highest and best use would maximize the financial capacity of a property. And so this is something less than highest and best use. This is a reasonable use. And so as we're considering whether or not the property is prevented from having a reasonable use, I don't think it equates to the highest and best use of the property. In other words, if it could be financially more productive, that's not really the standard. The standard is reasonable use. And then it's the board's determination as to whether or not granting the special exception will adversely affect neighboring properties. That's a factor that must be considered.
So I'd like to maybe hit on that first item related to impact to the neighbors. And maybe Mr. Batchelor, a couple questions that I want to answer. Maybe these are questions for Mr. Sandy. What are the hours of operation? So currently, I apologize. I've got actually a couple of questions sort of along the same line. So if you don't mind,
So right now, we're closing at 8 o'clock on Monday through Sunday through Thursday through Wednesday. Then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we're open until 9 o'clock.
I'll just add to that, of course, the zoning of the property allows them to operate from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m.
And that was my next question, is what's actually permitted instead of 11 p.m.?
Unless you, the board, would restrict it, add a condition to approve if you so wanted.
My other question relates to the courtyard. What is it currently used for? What's it recently been used for?
So previously, Hampton, he had an art gallery there, and it really looked like a junkyard. He literally had like rickety tables out there, and stuff was just piled in the yard. So it was in really bad condition. Vines had overgrown everything. We have plans to put in bluestone. That alone was $10,000 just to put bluestone down, and we're going to make it very, very high and very nice. And it's completely surrounded by a privacy fence. So you can't see through the fence all the way around it.
How tall is the fence?
It's at least, I'm 6'6". I mean, I'd say it's at least 6 to 7 feet. I mean, at least probably higher than that.
Yeah, I can't see over, you have to be 8 to 10 feet, I'm 6'2".
Lee, are you familiar with the city's special parking district overlay?
I am.
Yes. Can you explain to the board what that is?
So from Broad Street to Calhoun Street, all properties with frontage on King Street are exempt from being required to provide parking. So regardless, and that's all of the existing buildings. So existing buildings on properties with frontage on King Street between Broad and Calhoun do not have to provide any parking. And so a conversion from a retail use to a restaurant, that sort of thing can happen, and there's no parking issue that I need to deal with or the board needs to deal with.
And that was a legislative decision by council?
That is correct.
And the legislature, the city council decided that, what was the policy behind waiving the parking requirements along King Street in that Broad to Calhoun area?
Well, I think there was a feeling that the requirement for parking in that particular area was not needed because we have lots of public parking facilities, on-street metered spaces, other lots in that area that provide off-street parking. And we, and ending up in this situation where we have to address the required parking on these properties that have been there for 100+ years is at some point it becomes kind of meaningless to constantly revisit that issue in that particular area. So I was happy to support council's decision to move forward and do that.
And city council chose that particular area, and they could have, or they could in the future include other properties within that special parking district overlay, correct?
That's correct.
But it's not, this property is not within that overlay as we sit here today, right? That's why we're here in the application.
That's why we're here.
Okay.
I kind of tried to take a couple notes as both sides were presenting their arguments. And I'd gone online and I saw the hours of operation were from 10 to 8. And then I counted 16 seats, but I heard something less than I think it was originally approved for 12 seats in this area. Beer and wine sales, I think where the idea, I've heard things from beer and wine sales to liquor sales. So the original use was for beer and wine sales. And then I heard no commercial kitchen, that it's just going to be pre-prepared food. And we had the whole discussion about no activities on East Bay Street. There was the confusion about when permits were issued and what was allowed during COVID. The city made an attempt to have some sidewalk activities, but that was already eliminated by the CO, and then that activity was corrected by Lee's letter. And then I've heard no live or amplified music in the area. And then the whole discussion about the preload garage and the admitted landing garage. I'm assuming since all those were brought up, they would be okay activities.
There's no liquor at all.
Okay. No liquor sales. I mean, retail sales at the end, but no activity.
Yeah, just the liquor. I mean, the liquor stores is, it's not even, let's say we're eating.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to make sure I heard those things correctly.
Can we see the CO again, just the language of that? I felt that some of the residents who spoke in opposition, their remarks were about supporting this CO with the language of no tables and chairs and limiting it to this. And then the idea of that changing was kind of a powerful statement.
Further discussion, Robin?
It's never been a restaurant, right?
It has, actually. Yes, it was back. And actually, the guy with Charleston Library, he just did a podcast on it, and it absolutely, I sent you guys an email with a map where it shows there was actually a beer garden in 1885 in the back where our parking is. So it absolutely has been a restaurant in the past.
But in the past, I mean, I remember there's been retail use there for as long as I can remember. It was a jewelry store.
I mean, I think the thing that we have to consider is it is primarily residential right in that immediate area, and we need to make sure that whatever we decide does not negatively impact those residents. And I mean, I'm not really clear about the 400 whatever square feet of outdoor seating instead of having an indoor seating restaurant. I mean, that seems like that would create some noise and a negative impact for surrounding residents. But I mean, I might just not be understanding what's going on with that.
I think like Mr. Wilson brought up too. I mean, there already is a reason for the use of the lot. That's been used this way for many, many years. It's not preventing that.
Mr. Goodwin, any thoughts or observations? You can pass if you like.
You spoke about highest and best use, and you're absolutely right. This is reasonable use of the property. I hadn't been here 100 years, but I do know it's been retail use. And I am concerned about the impact on the neighborhood. I do realize that it's a small space. However, I'm always concerned about these being passed on to the property and not the owner. So that's what my thoughts are.
All right, any further discussion, or does anybody have a motion?
I have a couple of final comments that don't make the motion.
Sure.
I don't think the decision we make here is precedent setting, or I think we're held to any sort of prior precedent. Certainly we've gone both sides in relation to parking on these issues. I think we have to let's consider how these exceptions carry through into the future, regardless of who the tenant, business owner is. Hopefully parking doesn't tend to bother them too much, or lack thereof, but I do think that the impact on neighbors is a significant detriment. And so for that reason, I'm going to move to deny the application.
All right, Mr. Bennett moves to deny the application. Is there a second? Ms. Grass seconds the motion to deny. All in favor of the motion to deny, which is a vote against the application? Aye. Anybody for the application? Anybody votes nay? All right, Mr. McKay. The ayes have it on the motion to deny. That is a 5-1 vote, and the application is denied. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is B540. We'll wait for everybody to head out. All right, the next item on our agenda is B540 B Street, Unit 414, Canterbury, Elliottboro, TMS number 460-11-04-220, zoned LB, requesting a variance from section 54-227 to allow a commercial short-term rental unit that shares common areas. Ordinance does not permit common areas or other areas serving more than one dwelling unit and/or commercial short-term rentals except driveways on the lot where commercial STR is proposed. The owner applicant is Timothy Locke.
So this is a condominium unit in a development on B Street that has many condominium units. And it's located right here on the northeast corner of B and President Street, just north of the Medical University. And in addition to these condominium units and the surface parking, there are common area spaces within the building. And here's another view of the building. So there are two buildings, this building and this building, both have residential condominium units on them. And the property, of course, is zoned commercially. It's located in the ST overlay zone, which means that a commercial zoning entitles a property to have commercial short-term rental units or convert residential dwelling units to commercial STR units if the conditions listed in the ordinance are met. And the request concerns this particular condition F at the bottom of the page. So under subsection 2, it says conforming legal or non-conforming or legal non-conforming dwelling unit may be converted into a commercial short-term rental only when all of the following conditions are satisfied as evidenced by an application of site plan and floor plans. F, there are no common areas or other areas serving more than one dwelling unit and or commercial short-term rental on the lot except driveways.
So we have apartment buildings, and we have this condominium building that are within the commercial short-term rental overlay zone. And one particular apartment building is the building that was constructed at the corner of Spring and King Street. That's in the commercial ST overlay zone as well. And so that building would qualify for short-term rental units up to a certain number of short-term rental units if the conditions were met. Well, in that particular case, of course, that's a brand new apartment building. They've got exercise rooms, large rooms, exercise facilities for those residents. They've got the common areas that you'd find in any typical apartment complex, new apartment complex, that sort of thing. So I told somebody who's looking at buying that building, said, no, you can't qualify. In this case, we've got an older condominium building, residential condominium building, and it does have some common areas. It has as I understand it, a study room, and I can't remember what the other room is, but there are common facilities, common room facilities in that building for the residents of that building to use. And so for that reason, we denied the request to have a short-term rental unit, commercial short-term rental unit, or convert this dwelling unit into a commercial short-term rental unit. So this owner is applying for the variance to allow that conversion. And when we adopted these conditions for these permits, we did so with the understanding that some properties would not meet these conditions and they would not be entitled to these approvals. And so we basically drew a very bright line and said, if you can meet these conditions, you're good. You can't get the permit. We don't want conversions and we don't want variance requests. So we're not supportive of any variance requests. We haven't supported any variance requests to these types of conditions. And so for that reason, and I think there is a reasonable use of the property. It's been residential and it can continue to be a residential condominium. So for that reason, my recommendation would be denial of this application.
All right, thank you, Lee. Do we have anybody here to speak in opposition to the application at B Street? If you're here in opposition, just raise your hand. All right, no one is here in opposition. Do we have the owner applicant here? Yes, sir, Mr. Law. Please come on up and tell us about your application.
Thank you. So we are requesting a variance for 40B Unit 414 in Charleston for an STR permit. Before we purchased this property, our realtor, Nicole Orban, and I researched the area and reviewed all the guidelines in regard to this property. February 25th, 2022, Nicole and me spoke to Jason Rowe, the zoning compliance coordinator in the city of Charleston, who confirmed, and he said he knew the complex very well, that this unit could be a short-term rental at 40B. It currently is approved for short-term rental overlay. The only thing that would change was the HOA documents. He said we researched HOA, and the HOA or the regime was not against it, and there was no minimum nightly restrictions. On March 18, 2022, we purchased 40B for an amount of $320,000. Began the application process. We continue to be in touch with Jason and Tim McGee as we proceeded through each step, being reassured by both that we would be able to do a short-term rental on this building. Tim McGee said 9 units were allowed in our complex to be short-term rentals, and we were the first on the list we'd get rezoned over to short-term rental R1. June 29, 2022, we contacted licensed architect Alfonso Bay from Alberto Studios, who was willing to draw up the plans and rezoning provisions for from R2 to R1. We paid $4,750 to get this done. During this time, we continued to be in touch with Tim and Jason, and again was reassured that all we had to do was get through the paperwork, and we were starting to inquire about short-term rentals that we were first on the list, and there was a couple more people applying. October 23rd, 2022, we were asked for approval and rezone for a short-term R1 by Earl Gurley in the building inspection division. We made it all the way through the process up until the final inspection from Tim McGee. March 15th, 2023, during this last step, they said they missed the communal gym and study lounge, even though this had never been discussed and denied in our application. These two community units, and actually there's a laundry unit too, all three of these units are under lock with a keypad, and you only have to have access to them if you have that keypad access code, which we would not give to our guests. So our guests would not be allowed these amenities. Jason, Tim, and all the city officials have been extremely great to work with. They were very helpful. Every time I called, they answered and returned all my calls. We really appreciate all their help. But we spoke to our friend Dan Organ from Mobile taking some suggestions. We applied for a variance. We researched, we assured several times by multiple individuals that this could be a short-term rental. Have written approval from our regime, our unit got approved, rezoned, and we spent well over $30,000 just to rezone and update it for a short-term rental. And we do believe this would be a great asset to the USC and surrounding community. I really appreciate your guys' time. I'm more happy to answer any questions than I do have all the emails from our discussions.
Mr. Locke, could you say you have emails that are they not part of what you submitted?
No, they're
in your
not.
application?
There were just all the ones with Tim McGee and Jason Rowe in the past.
You have those with you?
Yeah, I do.
Would you mind bringing them up here, please? Thank you. That's okay. Sure, thanks. Mr. Batchelder, what's the city's position on what may have transpired or not prior to Mr. Falk purchasing this unit?
Well, that Jason Rowe is a member of the zoning division staff and does handle short-term rental applications and permits. And so to the extent that he may have misled Mr. Falk, I regret that, of course, but at the end of the day, we got to go by the written ordinance. And so, as one of my former colleagues used to say, the former chief building official, the ink is free. Regulations are publicly available, and we can't ignore what they say at the end of the day. So that's been our position since we discovered that there were these common areas on the property, which I don't think we knew about, and I don't think we haven't approved any other commercial short-term rental units on this property.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Are there any other units at 40 B Street that have been approved for short-term rental?
Yeah, no.
And if a buyer were going through the process, could they get a permit without being the owner? Can you attempt to apply for a permit as a contract purchaser, or is there any sort of a comfort level or any zoning letter that you could receive if you were going through that process and wanted to do your due diligence and make sure you could be approved for STR?
With a commercial short-term rental unit where the owner does not have to reside on the property and meet the residency 4% tax assessment requirement, I believe there would be an opportunity for a buyer to go through the application process and seek approval for a permit, conditioned on, of course, their purchase of the property.
And of course, that's the only thing that bothers me a little bit about this one is if he got guidance from the city prior to purchasing. And, otherwise, I think it's an easy decision.
It also, it doesn't sound like that they were aware that those common areas existed. I mean, there was nothing mentioned in that I saw, and we didn't mention it in the discussion, so. There's that.
Is there anything in the HOA bylaws that prevent, I guess probably not if there's not been a language for short-term use, but then prevent non-residents access to those amenity spaces? And maybe that's a question for the applicant. If, what I mean by that is, if these common areas are exclusively for the use of property owners.
They're exclusively to the long-term renters. So it's a separate code. There is a picture of thing. There's keypads on each door. It's a special code right there. There's keypads. It's a special code to get in there. So we just went on that. And we did say if communal things are such a big thing, why wasn't that told to us? And we did speak to Jason multiple times and Earl. So we went through. We had many conversations with both, but we just have to get rid of it.
Well, we can't really, I guess the biggest problem is we're a zoning board. We have to apply the zoning regulations as they're written. We may have sympathy, there may be recourse in other ways, but this board is limited to a review and application of the zoning ordinances and granting relief where we are permitted to by ordinance and not under equitable principles or because we feel bad about something. It's got to be something that we're authorized to do. So.
Are there other units in the building that have been approved?
Commercial short-term rental units? No.
No. So there's none in the building that's been approved for this?
No.
Any further discussion or are you ready with the motion? We're almost halfway through the agenda.
Only a third, really a third. I mean, I have sympathy for the applicant and feel like he's made the case for why it should be, but I feel like we don't have a choice legally, the board, which is frustrating, but.
I tend to agree. Yeah, I'm not sure that we're the mechanism for that relief. So I'll move for denial.
All right, Mr. Bennett moves to deny the application. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, Mr. McKay seconds the motion. All in favor, which is a vote to deny the application. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes. The application is denied. Thank you all. All right, the next item on our agenda has been withdrawn, and so now we're at B7 at 27 Elliott Street, Charlestown, TMS number 458-09-03-192, zone SR5, requesting a special exception under section 54-110 to allow a vertical extension of a non-conforming one-story building footprint, one-story addition with bedroom, bath, balcony. Owners are Sally and Brian Daughtry. Applicant is Laura F. Altman, architect. Mr. Batchelder.
This is a residential property on Elliott Street, just east of Church Street. And this is a view from Elliott Street of the house. It's a wood frame house that's been there for many years, and the vertical extension is an addition, a second floor addition over this one-story section of the house right here. As you can see, this house, although this parking lot is zoned residentially, it's not a residential use, it's a parking lot. And so that is the most impacted neighbor on for this application. And the applicant has submitted lots of information about the history of the property, and the drawings are very nice, and I'll just skip right to the one that illustrates the change, okay, right here. So on the top left, you see the existing house, the one-story addition right here, and then bottom left, you see the proposal with the second floor addition shown. And then this is the view from the back side of the house, showing that change proposed on the bottom. So very minimal impact, and the adjacent property is a parking lot, so I feel they meet the special exception test and recommend approval.
All right, thank you, Lee. So do we have anybody here in opposition to the application for 27 Elliott Street in opposition? All right. Anything you'd like to say to the board, Ms. Oliver?
Unless you have questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions for the applicant? All right, Mr. Goodwin moves to approve. Mr. Richards seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes unanimously. And the special exception for 27 Elliott Street is granted. Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda is B8, 12A Haygood Avenue, West Side, TMS number 460-11-01-029, Zone DR2F, requesting a use variance from Section 54-203 to allow a retail use vape smoke shop with days of operation Monday through Sunday and hours of operation 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. in a DR2F diverse residential zone district. Retail use grocery store Monday through Saturday 7:30 a.m. to 10 p.m. Sunday 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. previously approved by the BZA-Z on 4/3/12. The owner is James Bell. Applicant is Kasim Howder. Mr. Batchelder.
So this is a residentially zoned property on Haygood, West Side neighborhood. You can see on the zoning map here, it's located between Spring Street and Ashton Street, and it's surrounded by other buildings that are residential use. This particular building has a history of non-residential use, so but it's still zoned residential. And the request now is to change from what it has been, which is a grocery store basically, that was approved back by the board in 2012, to this vape smoke shop, retail use vape smoke shop. And so a different type of use than a grocery store, in our opinion. Plus, they're proposing slightly different hours than the store. So the grocery store had 7:30 a.m. to 10 p.m., except Sunday when it was 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And the vape shop would have 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week, according to the information we received. So that's longer, staying open longer on Sunday when the grocery store was allowed to operate. So those two things are different and require your approval tonight as a use variance, which requires a supermajority of the board to vote in favor. And so the retail space shown here, and I think, so I don't really have a good view from the street, but here's the building right here. is sandwiched, as you can see, between two residential homes and other residential surrounds it. And you've got commercial across the street. Of course, McDonald's was here on the corner, and then the building across the street, which was office, is going to be converted to a hotel. So, they have submitted this petition of support, which was probably maybe in your packet as well, but and that's the information we have. I don't know exactly what the neighborhood's position is. We've, of course, been concerned about changing it from what it has been to what they're proposing here, but I'm interested to hear what the neighborhood folks have to say, and because I see Mr. Lawrence is here tonight, and perhaps others want to speak as well. But so I'm tentatively supportive if the neighborhood is, but if the neighborhood is not supportive, then I would be opposed to this. And I'm certainly concerned about the hours that they're proposing, especially on Sunday for this type of use. So those are my thoughts.
All right, thank you, Lee. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak in opposition to the application? If you're in opposition, please raise your hand. Okay, so we'll get with you in just a moment. Do we have the owner applicant here? Okay, is there anything you'd like to say to the board? Would you like to present and state your case?
Yeah, I'll share on his behalf.
Okay.
Can I provide you with the updated flyer from the one that you had there?
Sure.
Thank you. Good to meet you. Spoken on the phone a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Might be one short. Okay. Thank you for your time. If you'll allow me to address the two things that you just brought up real quick, the hours on Sunday are not a deal breaker for us, so if that's going to be a significant issue to the board, we can certainly adjust to the previous hours that were allowed with the use variance. We did present to the neighborhood association last week. We received a bit of mixed reviews, which I'm sure you'll hear in a moment. Their main concerns were parking, the general clientele that a smoke and vape store attracts, and then the fact that it's residential, of course. Parking, I believe, is not an issue. There's plenty on Haygood, as you can see right there, and then also down on what's that across Ashton Street. You can also see that it's not directly on Haygood, but it's kind of on the corner of Haygood and Spring. There is commercial there as well. I believe that's a KFC and a Taco Bell there. Yep, everything else is perfect. On the reverse of that flyer there, you'll see, I believe it's 22 signatures from neighbors who endorse this use, so it wouldn't be a significant hindrance to their quality of life, or that they were in support of the actual use variance. And then lastly, parking use variance hours. Just the general use that's been approved in the past, be it a grocery store. DL Market, I believe it was called. They sold tobacco, alcohol, and lottery. We won't be selling lottery or alcohol, which I believe is an overall net positive for the community. So I appreciate your time and thank you for being open to this use variance.
Thank you. All right, we'll hear from the folks in opposition. Well, is there anybody else here who wants to speak in favor?
My name is James Bell, and I'm the owner of 12 Haygood Avenue. I know it's been granted for retail use, like so I'm a retired retailer. I had a store on the east side. It's like it's over 30 years. But this smoke shop, the people over 80 is gonna come in. No kids, no teenagers gonna hang out. Corner stores will go out to hang out. There's zone for that. I think I'm asking the board as on the future. I know it's special use for it, but I don't want to put nobody in this going to make anything bad for the neighborhood. Because I live in the neighborhood. I live Parkwood Avenue. And most of the people are coming to visit. We know each other as well. I just ask that you allow him to do that. He'll adjust to whatever he have to. And then on his lease, I'll put whatever. Guys, recommend on the lease, but do the right thing. For the future, I would just ask that you grant this because a corner store is very intense. You can go in any convenience store, gas station, you sell all those same things right in there. You can easily apply for a store license like you want. Just sell those things anyway. But he's doing it the right way. And that's why I'm celebrating my birthday today. It's the prime time of it. I won't be able to stay any longer. But in God we trust. You guys will do the right thing and be good.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else here to speak in support of the application? Yes,
Real
sir.
quick, I won't hold anybody else's time up. I know it's been a long evening. Peter Derry, also helped represent the owner. We did a spot for him at, what's the other street we're on? On Hugie Street, that was approved by the board, maybe 6 months ago. And that is right next to the James Simmons Elementary and across from Berkeley's restaurant. And there was a little bit of opposition from the community that it might create a bad atmosphere. And it's been completely the opposite of the case. It's helped pick up the neighborhood. It's helped bring an empty spot with a better usage, and there's been no incidents of any kind of bad activity or minors or anything in that store. And that's an even higher traffic area than where the neighborhood spot would be. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, now we're around to the opposition, I think, unless there's somebody else out there who wants to speak in support. All right, seeing no one, I'll hear from the opposition.
Good evening, everyone. I'm James Randolph. I'm the owner of 14 Haygood Avenue, which is a duplex that sits right next to number 12. That section of Haygood Avenue is completely residential from the Highway 17, which is an extension of the crosstown, to Ashton Street. There are homes on that particular location. It's all residential parking. They're from the corner of 17 to Ashton Street, which is a short distance. Then from Ashton Street on down to Fishburne Street, you have the Haygood Avenue housing projects there. And the usage of the tobacco products there is problematic from a traffic standpoint. There's not a lot of parking there. There is commercial across the street, which is McDonald's, and which is the old MUSC building, which is going to be torn down to be a hotel. But everything on the opposite side of the street, which the vape shop will be, is all residential. The makeup of the neighborhood is such that the individuals that will be attracted to the vape shop with the flashing lights and fancy lights and things of that nature are going to be individuals not necessarily cannot afford it, just folks can afford it and they choose to buy. But the tobacco products are going to be a lot of times purchased more so and admired by children to give an adverse effect to the community. As it sits right now, the trash can, if you look at the photographs and you can't see the pictures, it doesn't really give the accurate depiction of what it is. My home is, which I don't live there, but I rent to two tenants. One's a lawyer downstairs and the other one's being renovated. But and look, my home is the green one sitting here. It sort of sit back in the neighborhood, sit back away from both of these. This is an abandoned building that's been abandoned for about 20 years, and now that's being allowed to be demolished by neglect. This one's vacant. This one's owned by a gentleman whose family member is here. So these are all folks that live here. they have off-street parking here, but there's not much parking now. There's no garbage can in front of this particular business because all the garbage cans are in front of my house. There's no way to empty the trash cans. The trash can sits in front of my building, which I don't object because I know Mr. Bell. Mr. Bell is a nice gentleman. So I allowed them to put the trash cans in front of my building for his residential tenant that lives on the second floor. So how are they going to dispose of the trash? There's no way to exit this building from the back or the other three sides of it. The only exit is from the front. So how are they going to dispose of the trash where they're going to put it? It's problematic. Right now, the trash cans sit in front of my building, which, on certain days, they don't smell, but majority of the time it does. And, but we deal with it. We try to be good neighbors. But in this particular instance, you have the housing projects that sit here. And if, even if the parking's not an issue, and if they're looking for walk-up traffic is going to come from most of the renters who rent from these particular places. And a lot of these are rental homes. They're not necessarily homes that are actually owned by actual tenants. So if you look at the makeup of the list that they gave you, you see apartment numbers on those lists. You see H, F, J. Those are all signatures that have been gathered from individuals that are actually renters and not actually homeowners. So, but the homeowners, the folks who actually own the homes, are against the sale of tobacco. And we think it'll just attract people hanging out unnecessarily in front of these particular locations where we live. There's no way to police it. My wife and I and other folks was at the neighborhood meeting in opposition of the applicant's application. Since that time, he's not made any effort to talk to us, knowing that we're in opposition, to give us any satisfaction about what he's going to sell. We know that vape cartridges are disguised in magic markers, zip drives, flash drives. The use now of middle school children to high school kids, the use now of vape is extremely high. And they're being concealed from parents by being sold in items that can be disguised as household items and school pens, pencils, and things of that nature. So, and saying that we have a lot of negative influence in the communities in which people like me live. We're tired of the alcohol establishments, the cigarette establishments, the lottery tickets, those type of establishments being set up and run in our neighborhoods, and we hope not to have it done again to us at this particular time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Randolph. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, and board members and city staff. My name is Arthur Lawrence, and I live at 210 Fishburne Street for over 75 years. And I was the neighborhood president of the West Side Neighborhood Association for over 20 years. And I spent 28 years with the military, and we believe in death. Now, in that 20 years as neighborhood association, people couldn't walk the street to go to church, our senior citizens. All kinds of things was happening. But we changed that. Now we have a medical community. Just about everyone that live in this area or rent have some connection to MUSC. Now, I took my time out to check this area out by sitting in McDonald's parking lot, watching this particular building, 12A Haggard Avenue, and watch the traffic flow. Most of the people that walk through there, they come down Spring Street, go to the MUSC parking lot. MUSC parking lot, drop the bus off across the street from this establishment, and there's hardly no foot traffic. The city has the data how many stores were there before and failed. We have Publix right across the street behind McDonald's. You couldn't say this is a food desert. Now, it would be nice if the owner come to the neighborhood prior to coming to the board and let us know his idea and what he's trying to put in there. Several times this came before the board and it was denied. Now, when you look at this, it's right practically in the middle of a medical complex. A medical complex. One vice don't offset the other vice. Now, we took a vote at the neighborhood association meeting to deny this establishment to be established. Haggard Avenue is an up and coming in the city. We have several things. The Bennett Hotel is going to be established in a 150-room hotel right across from this establishment. And one of the things came up in our meeting and with parking, and the gentleman said, well, we're going to park across the street. Across the street, MUSC bus drop their workers off to go in the garage to take their car. I know Mr. Bennett is not going to allow any parking in the front of his 150-room hotel. And if you come down Ashton Street during the day, I drove down there just about every day. My truck can't hardly fit on Ashton Street. I had to pull in somebody's yard the other day because the cars was coming off of Haggard Avenue because some of MUSC workers park on Ashton Street, Allway Street. The city of Charleston have a center around that particular area what they're trying to clean up. Now to bring something like this into our neighborhood is a detrimental to this neighborhood and to those development that happen on Haggard Avenue. Now, I want to check, they brought a list to you. I have an asterisk by those individuals that live on Gaston Green. And if you call some of those numbers, they're teenagers. They didn't target homeowners. On the other side of this, so they're trying to put in, my first cousin just developed and renovated 2 houses right next door. And they're medical students, medical people. They don't go down there to smoke. And I went to all of those residents, and they said, no, they do not want it. They didn't target those individuals along that street. They didn't come to you with a letter from those individuals that live on Haggard Avenue, that own homes. We have an agreement with the Bristol. They have their own association. Gaston Green have their association. If they need help, we try to come together. But we try to get them to come to our association to participate. They don't. So when you look at that list, that area is being targeted for smoking. When the police try to clean up Allway Street, who do you think they're gonna go at next? Right to this store to smoke and make deals. So we beg you to deny this application for this west side to continue to make progress in the right way for the city of Charleston and for the resident that live there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lawrence. Anyone else here to speak in opposition to the application for 12A Haygood? All right, you're entitled to a rebuttal.
I'll respect y'all's time and just go down the list real quickly. I can certainly sympathize with everyone living in the neighborhood, but none of the objections really hold much water. Trash, we can move the trash can in front of our building. Parking is abundant. I've been down there over a dozen times and never had an issue with parking. Use by minors, we enforce 18-year-old and above laws. He has a sign in his store that it's got to be 21 and above, so that's not going to be an issue at this store, perhaps the other stores, but not in this one. The vote that they took at the meeting, like there weren't enough people to actually make it a binding vote. The vacant building, I assume that we would all agree that a business being in a building is better than a vacant one. The business that abides by the law and does business the right way and comes and presents hopefully to in a respectful way, I think is better than a vacant building. And I think that is progress in a way. And then the signatures were not targeted. We weren't targeting anyone. We were just out there for an hour, surveyed foot traffic, and 22 individuals of varying walks of life, but all of age in that area. Yes, some in the projects, but some on Spring Street, some on Ashton, some on Haygood. 22 of those individuals of age so that they would be okay with or in support of this usage. So those are the objections I heard. Those are my responses.
Thank you, sir. All right, Mr. Batchelder, your position of the city on this one is?
I would recommend denial. Maybe there's a glimmer of hope for the applicant that they could go back and talk to the residents in the immediate area around this property and come up with a compromise position. Maybe their hours could be reduced and something like that. But I really would like to see them make more of an effort to do that.
All right, so is speaking to the applicant, and I know Mr. Bell has left, he's the owner, but would the applicant be willing to defer its application to have more community involvement with the West Side, or is this something that we need to go ahead and vote on today?
Could I ask for some clarification with what we'd be seeking from them? Just the objections to be resolved, I guess? Or?
Well, if there are community concerns, I think that the idea would be that you could open up a dialogue with the community leaders and make a determination as to whether or not you can address any of the concerns that they might raise. And you either can or you can't, but the effort would be there. And if you can, then you come back and you have their support. It's a different situation than than where you are here tonight, and it would be a different situation. If you can't get their support, so be it, but you're no worse off.
I would be happy to go back and talk to the West Side Neighborhood Association. I mean, I know Mr. Lawrence's opinion is not going to change of the property, which is a little disappointing. It's heartening for us because we're kind of beating our heads against the wall. I am a West Side neighborhood owner, have been for a long time. Used to attend the meetings over North Central now, but Mr. Lawrence never really there. I mean, there was only a few people at that meeting that spoke out in opposition, so I don't think the majority of the folks that are in this room tonight necessarily represent the entire West Side Neighborhood Association's feelings, and there was no actual vote taken because there wasn't a quorum that evening. So,
Well, it may,
difficult to say that, you know, the few people that aren't interested in having it that are here tonight get to be the supermajority of the West Side Neighborhood Association's vote because there was no actual vote taken.
and it's possible that nothing changes, but it's possible that you might learn something as well. So it's
We'd be happy to go back to the West Side and present to them again.
I'll let you make a correction through that statement. I brought the vote up and it was second. And I told the president to make sure that you put this in black and white, because if it comes before the board again, if you remember when I called for the president to call for the vote and put it in black and white, basically it's come up again. We took the vote. I had the majority of the people there for deny this establishment. That's on the record. And you were there when I told her that, correct?
Yeah, I was there when that happened. I don't know all the Robert's Rules of Orders, but I don't think a vote can be taken if a quorum's not had. Maybe this board knows better than I do.
Okay, well, that's, let's not get into the details of the process of a neighborhood association. The question is, would you be willing to defer, or do you want us to go ahead and vote?
We'll defer.
So, yeah, please.
I just wanted to say, I think equally important to getting, working with the neighborhood association and coming to some consensus is working with Mr. Randolph and those residents immediately adjacent to this property and getting their support and making sure that they're comfortable with what y'all are doing.
All right, so we have a voluntary deferral, but we might as well make a record of it. So just may have a motion.
I'll move for deferral.
All right, Mr. Bennett moves to defer. Mr. McKay seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. Oh, you're opposed? Yeah. Okay. One is opposed. Mr. Goodwin Jr. would oppose the deferral, and so we have a 5-1 vote in favor of the deferral this evening. So we'll be on another agenda. All right, the next item on our agenda is B9, 46.5 Cooper Street, East Side, TMS number 459-06-01-013, Zone DR2F, requesting a special exception under Section 54-501 to allow construction of a single-family residence on a lot of insufficient size. Lot area of 1454 square feet, 2,500 square feet are required. Requesting a variance from Section 54-301 to allow construction of a single-family residence with a 3-foot west side setback, a 6-foot total side setback, and 55% lot occupancy. 7 feet, 10 feet, and 50% lot occupancy are required. The owner is RCC Properties LLC. The applicant is Chelsea Anderson, Habitable Form. Mr. Batchelder.
This is a landlocked parcel, zone residential located in the east side. You see it here on the zoning map. It, I'm not sure how this ever happened, but it exists today, and it's separately owned from the property at 46 Cooper Street in front. It has access from America Street over 114 America. So there's an easement you'll see from America Street to get to this property. But aerial view showing the houses around it and occupants materials. And again, this is the survey that shows the easement for access to this property. And so the applicant has designed a home to fit on this lot that takes advantage of that easement to provide the required parking on site. And so go through the slides that they submitted. You can see other lots where homes have been approved for lots of insufficient size. I think that's what this is showing. And then this is a slide that illustrates the existing lot occupancies of some of the surrounding homes. And you can see that all of these slides that are highlighted are above 50%, and some are in the 60s, 68%. I see, and I don't see what the slide is on the bottom because I can't do that Zoom information. And more information. But I'm just going to get right to the chase and say we recommend approval of this home to be constructed on this lot of insufficient size. It's similar in size, I think, to those other properties that were highlighted in that first slide. And this slide illustrates the site plan with the home meeting setback requirements on 3 sides, but not the west side. And then, of course, because of that west side reduction, there's a request for total side setback reduction as well. And then you see the home that is going to be proposed. These are just schematic drawings, not final drawings, but so 3-story home that is allowed by the zoning on the property, and it's in a flood zone, so meeting all those requirements. And let's see. So my recommendation is for approval, and we're not aware of any objections or concerns.
All right, anybody have any opposition to the application for 46.5 Cooper Street? All right, seeing no one in opposition, do we have the owner applicant here? Anything you'd like to say with board?
No, if you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you. So, any discussion, questions? Do we have a motion?
I do have one question.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but was that back half of the lot separated off, subdivided off of it?
I don't know the history of it, like why that was separated. I mean, I would imagine 46 was one at one time and they subdivided 2. I don't know when that happened.
Sorry, just curious the history.
Sure. Any other questions?
Make a motion for approval.
All right, Mr. McKay moves to approve. Do I have a second? All right, Ms. Richards seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes unanimously, and the special exception and variance for 46.5 Cooper Street is granted. All right, the next item on our agenda is B10, 1179 King Street, North Central, TMS number 463-08-03-1-046, zoned SR2, requesting a special exception under section 54-110 to allow a horizontal and vertical extension of a non-conforming building footprint 1.5-story addition with a 5-foot north side setback. 9 feet are required. The owner applicant is Jerome Prezi. Mr. Batchelder.
So this is a residential property on King Street, Upper King Street, between Peachtree and San Souci, in the North Central neighborhood. It has an existing 1-story home on it, and this aerial view shows the existing 1-story home right here. Like the owner is seeking your approval to do is build an addition, which would be a 1.5-story addition in this location. And continue that existing 5-foot north side setback that part of the house has right here. So they would fill in this corner right here with the addition, and bottom elevations are the proposed. Well, actually, this is all proposed. No, yeah, this is all proposed elevation. So what you have today So this is the front elevation, and it's just a one-story house. So they're basically adding this section right here, plus this up here. So that's the addition from the front. And special exception is required, and we think that this meets the special exception requirements and recommend approval.
All right, thank you, Lee. Anybody here in opposition for the application for 1179 King Street? All right, seeing no one in opposition, do we have the owner applicant here? All right, anything you'd like to say to the board?
Nothing's been said tonight, I'm gonna let you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. All right, question. Ms.
Sorry,
Bass
I have
has a
another
question.
question.
Sure.
Of course I do. This has to go before BR, since it's on King
Yes.
Street.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Any other questions for Lee or for the owner applicant?
Move for approval.
All right, Mr. Bennett moves to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, Mr. Goodwin seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes unanimously. The special exception for 1179 King Street is granted. Thank you, sir. All right, the next item on our agenda, B11, 698A Rutledge Avenue, North Central, TMS number 463-15-04-070, requesting a use variance from section 54-203 to allow a retail store and coffee cafe shop with limited seating area, 40 square feet for takeout orders with days of operation Monday through Sunday, and hours of operation 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. in a DR1F diverse residential zone district. Variance and special exception for retail use with no parking approved by BZA-Z 31522. Owner is 358 Trevor LLC, Ben D'Alessandro, applicant Joel Sadler and Allison Sutton. Mr. Batchelder.
So this is a corner store building that's zoned residentially, sits on the corner of Cleveland and Rutledge Avenue, right across from Hampton Park. And the board heard a request for allowing commercial use on the ground floor, not a coffee cafe shop, though. There's a retail use, and then office and residential upstairs, I believe. But now and so that was the original approval, but without any potential tenant. And now they've got a tenant who would like to move into this space with, that does the coffee cafe use for takeout purposes. And that seems like a great use for this corner. I mean, this building really has been neglected for years, and finally we've got a buyer that's come along and invested in fixing it up and finding good uses for it. And I think that would be a wonderful use for this location, given the park is right across the street and so on and so forth. So I'm not aware of any objections or concerns to this, and I think again, I think it's great to recommend.
All right, thank you, Lee. Anybody here in opposition to the application for 698A Rutledge? All right, seeing no one here in opposition. Do we have the owner or applicant, somebody on behalf of the? Okay. Anything you'd like to say to the board?
Well, it depends on how you're gonna.
You don't get to know. All right. Any questions for the owner applicant? Any questions for the city? All right, Ms. Grass moves to approve. Richard seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes unanimously. And the use variance and special exception for 698A Rutledge Avenue is granted. Thank you.
Just would like to say thank you. We're really looking forward to serving Charleston out of that location.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. All right.
And they have a ground location. I forgot to show their slides right here. Yeah. Vine Street location. Right, Vine Street.
That's it.
Very cool.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda is B12, 8 Murray Boulevard, Charlestown, TMS number 457-16-03-002, zoned SR2, requesting a variance after the fact from section 54-301 to allow a shed addition with a 0-foot east side setback and a 0-foot rear setback. 9 feet and 25 feet are required. The owner is Leo Chakouris. Applicant is Clark Batchelder. All right, Mr. Batchelder.
8 Murray Boulevard, residential property, and this illustrates it well. It's located right adjacent to the parking lot for the Fort Sumter House, and backs up to a residential property on South Battery. But if you'll notice, there's a building on the South Battery lot that comes right up to the back of this lot in the location where this accessory building is located. And here's the aerial view illustrating the attractive parking lot next door. And what they're proposing is to have this accessory building. Actually, it's already there. It's just an after the fact approval, but they would build it right up against the east side property line and the north side rear property line of this property. And photographs that show back. Here's the building that was constructed without permits, but it was there. So we've looked at the tree issues. There are no tree issues as far as I know with this. And so the only issue from a zoning standpoint is getting your approval for the setback variances. And of course, they're working around the trees that are there. And then, and this is a floor plan of the existing building. So just a 1-story building elevation shown here. And it's just a storage kind of building, activity building. And that's it. So given the location, the fact that there's a building on the South Battery lot that backs right up to this location, I can't see how this would adversely affect anybody. And I think it's a reasonable variance request to proceed given these circumstances. And so my recommendation is for approval.
All right, thank you, Lee. Anyone here in opposition to the application for 8 Murray Boulevard? All right, seeing no one in opposition, do we have the owner or applicant here?
Yes.
All right, anything you'd like to say to the board?
We do have signed letters from the neighbors saying that they are agreeing to deactivate that shed. So the neighbors are accepting the application.
Can we back up on that slide a little bit and let me just see the overview of like a GIS style?
This or this?
The one before, please.
This.
Yes. So where are we? We're on this corner here. Is that right?
This corner right back.
Okay. So we're adjacent to the parking lot. What's the building that's immediately adjacent to this?
Where?
You know the address of the rear of the building of the house of the rear.
The house?
On South Battery?
That would be 47.
Okay.
South Battery.
47 South Battery is okay with it?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, they actually have an accessory building, which is mirrored this accessory building.
I see, okay, on the other
So,
side.
Yeah, so really there's no visual impact.
Okay, anybody else have any questions for the applicant?
Was this brought to your attention by a stop work order? How did this
I was
come
wondering
to
too.
attention?
I don't recall how it came in.
I believe it was
The
somebody.
BAR, maybe, for a
I
stop
think it was a stop work order because they didn't have a permit. And we reached out to BAR and BAR brought attention to you guys. And there is somewhat of a tree issue, but we did meet with Greg Bennett on site, and then he was accepting the current locations.
So did they remove any trees to put that? It looked like there might have been one that was removed.
No, didn't have to move any trees. He actually the owner built the shed around the trees to maintain the hidden aesthetic of that area with trees.
And what's the tree issue?
One of the trees is 33 inches in diameter, and it's less than 12 feet. It's this tree.
Lee, if the variance application comes before this board prior to being constructed, would the city have supported it?
I think I would have, and the other important thing to keep in mind is we have these regulations that exceptions that allow us to approve accessory buildings within 3 feet of the side and rear property line. So the actual variance, but we have to take the variance from the actual standard setbacks of 9 and 25. So, but I think I would have been okay with this because of the fact that it butts up against a parking lot, number one. And then you've got that accessory building on the adjacent lot right behind the property. So, and homeowners have sought these kinds of requests in other situations in the historic district to minimize the impacts of these buildings on their yards, and that makes sense because yard space is a premium.
So this wouldn't have had to go before BAR?
Oh, it does have to go to the BAR.
So after us, it still has to go before BAR?
I believe so.
Yes, that's right. And just if I may add one more point, the owner does a great job protecting his property from floods and whatnot, hurricanes, especially the ones that just roll through. And so this shed is really going to be used for that equipment, for tools, for stuff to protect his property in a sense. So, not laying all these panels that he uses to protect his house from the flood. This is what he's going to use to store. So yeah, limited area in the back, and the location of the trees really limits where we put it. So tucked in the corner, I think, is a viable solution.
Okay. Style aside, I could think of just offhand at least 5, maybe 10, if I just hadn't thought about it, accessory buildings just like this that are right on the corner of properties in downtown. Even some that were just essentially an extension of garden wall. We didn't think so. It's not uncommon. I guess I'm not opposed to this. I think it's reasonable. I would move for approval, or I will move for approval. Okay.
All right, Mr. Bennett moves to approve. Mr. McKay seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, Ms. Grass is opposed. So we have a vote of 5-1 in favor of the after the fact variance, which is granted. And now you'll go before BAR. Let the record note that we have denied after the fact applications in the past, and we'll do so again in the future. It's not a good way to proceed. But this one passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
All right. Next item on our agenda is Mr. Bennett is recused. B13-1 Trapman Street, Charleston Village, TMS number 457-12-01-025, zoned DR1F, requesting a special exception under section 54-110 to allow a one-story addition painting studio that extends a non-conforming 2-inch north side setback 3 feet are required, requesting a variance from section 54-301 to allow a one-story addition painting studio with an 18.4-foot rear setback, 25 feet are required. The owners are Allie and Joe Britton. Applicant is AJ Architects, Ashley Jennings. Mr. Batchelder.
As you can see here, this is an unusually shaped lot, and the changes that are proposed are to the back of the existing house. So go right to the plans, and there are a lot of plans here. This is the existing site plan. And then a proposed site plan here. And so the special exception would allow for an extension of the non-conforming setback on this side, which is the north side setback, and then a variance to allow the one-story addition with 18.4 foot rear setback. And I might even say that this isn't a rear property line, it could be a side property line, different shape of it. But anyway, we've got it listed as a rear. And so that is, and you see that setback line, the actual setback line coming to the property right here. So anyway, that is the request, and given the odd shape of the property, and I think they meet the variance test, and I think they also satisfy the special exception requirement. I'm not aware of any objections or concerns from any neighbors. Might have something.
Okay, thank you, Lee. So anybody have anything to say in opposition to the application for 48 for 1 Trapman Street? All right, seeing no one in opposition, do we have the owner applicant? All right, anything to say to the board? Thank you. Any discussion? All right, Mr. McKay moves to approve. Do I have a second? Mr. Rath seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes unanimously. And the special exception for and variance for 1 Trapman Street are granted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda, B14, 26 B Street, Cannonboro, Elliottboro, TMS number 460-11-04-011, zoned LB. Requesting a variance from section 54-301 to allow construction of a detached dwelling with a 7-foot west side setback, an 11-foot total side setback, and 2-foot rear setback. 9 feet, 15 feet, and 3 feet are required. Requesting a variance from section 54-301 to allow HVAC platforms within the east side and rear setbacks. Owner is Alex Ramsey. Applicant is Andrew Gould. Mr. Batchelor.
So as you can see on the zoning map, this is commercially zoned property right in the midst of MUSC to the south and to the west of this property. It is a residentially used property, and it's right on the edge of what would be a residential section of the street. There's maybe some non-residential use in that road, buildings on the north side of B Street, but I think most of everything's residentially used right there, right next to the office building at 30B. So the new owner is wanting your approval to make some changes to the property. Here you see this aerial view that shows the rear of this property essentially being a surface parking lot. And of course, it's surrounded by a surface parking lot to the side and to the rear. So not a very attractive backyard that we're dealing with. And what they're proposing to do is add some residential units. The property is large enough that it's allowed to have additional residential units. And these are just more shots of surrounding views of the property. And so in the back of the property, now existing conditions and proposed site plan. So 2 more residential units would be added back here, and then parking would be arranged in a manner that satisfies our off-street parking requirements. But this back building that they're proposing is encroaching into the setbacks, and that's why they're asking for the variance they would like a 2-foot rear setback versus the 3-foot setback that's required, and an 11-foot total side setback and 7-foot west side setback versus the 9-foot west side setback and 15-foot. So, and normally I would say no, I wouldn't support this, but given that the back of the property and the west side of this property is a unattractive surface parking lot, I think it makes sense that they would position a building in a way that would cut off any view of that parking lot to the greatest extent possible and kind of help establish a residential edge to this this area of B Street. And this will have to go through the BAR, of course. So I have no objections to this. I think because of the location of the property, they satisfy the variance test that they're seeking. The other thing is that they're asking to allow the variance to allow the HVAC platforms in the east side and rear setbacks. And that seems reasonable as well, given what is around this property. So my recommendation is for approval of these variances.
Great, thank you, Lee. Anybody here to speak in opposition to the 26 B Street application? All right, seeing no one in opposition, do we have the owner applicant here? Anything you'd like to say to the board?
Well, again, the logic of this is that we've got this unique lot that has parking lots on all 3 sides of it, and all the views out of the lot are to kind of the modern medical buildings. So we're just trying to make the buildings turn inward and face a courtyard garden. I think we've got a pretty reasonable hardship argument that we've got an existing building that takes up half the length of the lot. So that kind of reduces our space for developing the rear. There's plenty of room to park all the cars towards the front of the lot, so there's no functional need for that wide side setback that normally is used for driveway and parking.
Thank you. Appreciate those comments. Anybody have any questions? Is it Mr. Gould?
Move for approval.
All right, Ms. Grass moves to approve. Have a second. All right, Ms. Richards seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes unanimously and the variance for 26 B Street is granted. Thank you. All right, the final item on our agenda is B1548 Rutledge Avenue, Charleston Village, TMS number 457-08-03-089, zoned STR, requesting a special exception under section 54-110 to allow a vertical extension of non-conforming building setbacks by allowing construction of a 3-story residence within the footprint of the existing 1-story building to be demolished. The existing building has a 1-foot north side setback, 11.5-foot south side setback, and 12.5-foot total side setback. Proposed building will have a 4-foot north side setback, 13.5-foot south side setback, and 17.5-foot total side setback. 6 feet, 12 feet, and 18 feet are required. The owners are Tina and Joel Christie. The applicant is Gov Gottschalk Architecture. Batchelder.
So this is a lot mid-block across from Colonial Lake on Rutledge Avenue, and you can see that there's a footprint on this lot. That's a 1-story masonry building that I guess probably replaced a house, multi-story house that sat there years ago, but for a long time it's been in this 1-story building that I think was built originally for an office. And now there's a proposal to demolish that and go back to a residential multi-story home on this lot. And in order to do that, they have to obtain these approvals from the board. But what they're proposing is really consistent with what you find up and down this block of Rutledge Avenue. So just to take you through the slides, here's the existing building on the right. Views and 46 Rutledge Avenue, which would be the house immediately to the south. And 44, 42 other buildings to the south. And then to the north, you've got 52 and 50 Rutledge Avenue and 56 Rutledge. So, this is the view from that front. And then let's get through these. So there's the proposed site plan and how it fits in with the homes around it. The lot is fairly wide for a residential lot, and that gives them the ability to have a home that is a little bit set back off the north side of the property line. In this case, they're proposing a 4-foot north side setback versus the existing building that has a setback that's less than 1 foot off the north setback. And they still have plenty of room for a driveway. Here's a blow up of that site plan. So the setbacks are listed, and it's a special exception to extend vertically the non-conforming setbacks. And these are the plans showing the proposal. Of course, this is now in a flood zone subject to the flood elevation requirements that require elevating the first floor substantially above where most of the other homes on that street are located. So that's an issue for them. And of course, they'll have to go through the BAR and get the plans approved by the BAR, but this is the proposal for what they're seeking your approval for. And that pretty much concludes it. My recommendation is for approval, and again, we're not aware of any objections or concerns to this request. And so our recommendation is for approval.
All right. Anybody here in opposition for the application 48 Rutledge? All right. Owner applicant here? Both?
Yes, sir.
All right. Anything you'd like to say to the board?
The only thing I would add is that we have already secured permission from the BAR to demolish this building. So that's not something that we have to go forward to. So that has been procured already.
Lee, I have a question. I don't know if anybody else has a question. So when there's a demolished building and they're building a new building within that existing footprint, none of the setback issues are grandfathered. They've got to come before this board to get a building, even if it's within the same footprint as the old demolished building.
No, I view the language in our zoning ordinance to mean that non-conforming building footprint is grandfathered if you demolish it. So for up to 3 years, you can go back and build the same building,
so long as it's
same height building within that same footprint.
It's only because they're exceeding the setbacks that were grandfathered by the old building footprint that they haven't come here.
Well, that they're vertically extending basically those non-conforming.
I see.
Setbacks.
Okay, I'm with you. So if they didn't build anything higher, then they wouldn't have to be here.
Right.
We ask about neighbor support.
Neighbors will give me an award for getting rid of stuff. And as I told John Heckenberg, I'm not getting flooded out the third time. Just a minute.
All right. Anybody else have any questions for the city, for the applicant?
I'll make a motion to approve.
All right, Mr. McKay moves to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, Mr. Bennett seconds the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None are opposed. The motion passes unanimously and the special exception for 48 Rutledge Avenue is granted. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Adjourn this very long, full meeting.
We are happy not to have been a reason for the being prolonged longer.
Anything for that.